Chapter 121. Island Reinforcement, again. And Ling left the resource island 3 hours early. It wasn't that she didn't want to continue chopping trees, but her backpack and the ship's cabin storage were completely full. Thus, she had no choice but to return to the construction island. From afar, standing at the bow of the ship, and Ling saw Suyu, who was happily waving at her while fishing for supplies on the shore. How was the harvest? Suyu asked impatiently as soon as the boat docked, stepping forward. In her impression, anything that could delay Ling for so long must have yielded an incredible haul. Ling chuckled, jumped ashore, and tossed her backpack onto the ground. Take a look. Suyu hurriedly unzipped the backpack, peering into the storage compartments. She was instantly stunned. So many? 2,000 pieces of wood. After upgrading, the backpack's capacity had not only increased to 24 slots, but each slot's capacity had also doubled from 50 to 100. 20 out of the 24 slots were completely filled with wood. The remaining slots held rubber, iron ore, and some of Ling's tools. There's more in the cabin, she said, pulling out Suyu's empty backpack and transferring the ore into it. This is unbelievable. Suyu was dumbfounded. She couldn't imagine that Ling had managed to gather all this alone in just 24 hours. Did you go rob someone? Actually, Ling said with a laugh, pulling a stack of cards from her pocket. I ran into the owner of the ocean clinic and had a fight with her. Here, the spoils of war. Holy crap. Suyu swore, almost thinking she was dreaming. She suddenly remembered what Ling had said yesterday. Indeed, plundering was the fastest way to develop. Check the channel now. I bet she doesn't dare to stay at coordinates 66, 66 anymore. After being defeated by Ling, the clinic owner would definitely choose to lay low for a while. So, is she really a beauty? And can she really heal? Suyu immediately started gossiping. The two women transported the supplies while recounting the events. Well, she definitely has the ability to heal, Ling mused. But her abilities are more inclined towards support and control, with less offensive power. As for her looks, well, she's a little less attractive than me. So far, I've hardly seen anyone prettier than you. What are you talking about? A little less attractive, or a whole lot less attractive? Suyu rolled her eyes. She hadn't expected this exploration to be so dangerous. In her impression, the owner of the ocean clinic should have been very strong, not someone Ling could easily defeat. I saved you breakfast. Thanks, Ling said, sitting down, even though it was almost noon. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Suyu starting to pack her bags. In such a hurry? Of course, we have to seize the time. Suyu finished preparing, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and came to Ling, placing a pistol on the table. It's your turn to guard the island. I already located the next resource island before you came back, and I succeeded. Oh, she dragged out the last syllable for emphasis. It might be dangerous out there. You should keep it for self-defense, and Ling pushed the pistol back. But Suyu shook her head. Don't worry, my luck is always good. And our island is the most important thing. I'll feel more at ease if you have it. She was preventing the possibility of an accident where the pistol might fall into someone else's hands, causing trouble for Ling. Although Ling was very strong now, she still couldn't stop bullets. While the possibility was slim, it was always better to be safe than sorry. Seeing Suyu's persistent refusal, Ling had no choice but to give in. What about these cards? I have trouble making choices. You decide, Ling. I'm off. Suyu waved and walked out of the house, ready to depart. Be careful, and remember to observe the island first, Ling reminded her. Don't worry, I'm not stupid, Suyu said confidently. Oh, by the way, this resource island is a bit far, so it might take a while to get there, but not as far as yours. All right, have a smooth journey. Ling watched as Suyu boarded the small boat and gradually sailed away from the island. Now, she had plenty to keep her busy. She still had 5 upgrade cards and 5 enhancement cards. The house was already big enough to comfortably accommodate 2 people, so there was no need to expand it for now. As for the self-made tools, they were like the items unlocked by item cards and couldn't be enhanced or upgraded. Otherwise, Ling really wanted to upgrade the electric fan. In the end, the buildings to be upgraded were the wooden boat, the solar propeller, the house, and the farm. The buildings to be enhanced were the wooden boat, 2 positioning navigators, and Suyu's bed. Finally, she saved 1 enhancement card and 1 upgrade card. intending to use them on Suyu's boat. Here were the changes to each building. First, the wooden boat was now a size larger and had a mast, allowing it to sail with a sail. The solar propeller had gone from one panel and one propeller to one panel and two propellers, meaning the boat now had two propellers at the stern, but still only one solar panel, albeit slightly larger. The farm, which originally had two separate greenhouses, was now combined into one, and spatial properties were added, meaning the plants would mature faster. The house's changes were simple. It went from 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen to also including a bathroom. The exterior decoration was also more refined, now resembling a modern house. Finally, the enhancements to the navigator and the bed were straightforward. The former expanded the search area from a radius of 10 kilometers to 30 kilometers. The latter turned into a modern single wooden bed, just like in Ling's. Enhancing the navigator was in Ling's way of preventing other survivors from ambushing her after she went out to sea. The higher the level of this device, the more control she had on the ocean. Done. She clapped her hands, looking at her small island with great satisfaction. Not to mention the entire ocean world, just within this channel. She was confident that both her strength and her island were among the best. It was almost noon. She had eaten a late breakfast and wasn't hungry yet. This morning's new blessing was still great luck and great profit, but it was no longer useful to her. Most of the newly unlocked buildings also required a furnace for processing, which she couldn't manufacture yet. After tidying everything up, Aboard and Ling could only go to the seaside and continue her monotonous fishing. Time passed minute by minute, and before she knew it, evening had arrived. The only constant was the scorching sun overhead. And Ling stood up, tidied up, and prepared to go inside, but for some reason, she had a faint premonition of unease. Chapter 122. Poisoned. The next day, at 6 in the morning, and Ling woke up. Glancing behind her, she saw Suyu's bed was empty. She still hadn't returned. And Ling quickly washed up and prepared breakfast. Habitually, she twisted the pendant around her neck and looked down at it. 2 golden figures were etched on its surface. Received blessing pendant bonus. Good things come in pairs. All acquired resources will be doubled. Remaining time, 17 hours, 45 minutes, 10 seconds. Today's blessing was unremarkable. It seemed she would continue fishing for resources in a standard fashion. Stepping outside, and Ling added materials to the furnace, tended to the farm, and then picked up her fishing rod. During the tedious fishing, and Ling opened her light screen to pass the time. There's so much information. She looked at the system notifications in the lower right corner with some surprise. The light screen had never sent reminders before. Clicking on it, dozens of messages popped up, each with the exact same content. Channel 645 has fewer than 50,000 people. It will be merged with Channel 646. Channel 233 has fewer than 50,000 people. It will be merged with Channel 234. Channel 501 has fewer than 50,000 people. It will be merged with Channel 502. There were over 20 messages, all announcing channel mergers. It seemed the recent turmoil and the weather had significantly increased the casualties among survivors. And Ling closed the system notifications and opened the channel chat to kill time. The channel mergers were naturally the hottest topic, like trending searches on the internet. The second most popular topic was the disappearance of the Ocean Clinic. This mysterious and powerful survivor had vanished without a trace, and no one knew what had happened. Of course, since the XINU's Ocean Clinic debut, many survivors using rafts had started to imitate her. There was the sea restaurant, as the name suggested, but Ling found it useless. People now could barely survive. If anyone went there, it must be to rob it. There was even a more outrageous one, the sea brothel, also self-explanatory. Ling guessed that it must be a small organization, only women, who used their mouths to exchange for supplies. You could say they were working hard. It seemed to be booming at the moment, with very brisk business, but no one knew how it would fare in the future. Without exception, these people weren't focused on survival. Instead, they wanted to do business in this lawless, disaster-ridden, and dog-eat-dog world, accumulating wealth to grow and develop. This method could be effective, but there was a prerequisite: strength, or a powerful organization backing them. Just as Ling was trying to relieve her boredom, a small boat finally appeared on the distant horizon. It was Suyu, returning. As the boat got closer, Ling immediately put down her fishing rod and stood up, her expression turning serious. Su Yu's condition was wrong. Was she injured? And Ling finally understood why she had a premonition of unease. Something bad had happened after all. When the boat docked, she rushed forward to meet her. What happened? What's wrong? Su Yu's face was as pale as paper, but there were no visible wounds on her body. It wasn't until Su Yu lifted her foot that Ling noticed. She was barefoot, and her left calf was tightly constricted by a sock. The lower part was red and swollen, with 2 circular bite marks above it. Were you bitten by a snake? Ling helped Su Yu to the pavilion and sat her down. It was a snake swarm. I couldn't defend myself. Su Yu explained weakly in a wonder. The drawbacks of her profession were obvious at this stage. First, she was vulnerable in close combat, and second, she lacked effective area of effect attack methods. Ling leaned down, wanting to suck out the venom. 2. The blood in her mouth was dark red and tasted acrid. She spat it into the sea, but further attempts to suck out the venom were useless. Su Yu's face remained pale. It was a long way back. It must have been several hours. I feel a little dizzy. I think I can still hold on. I got the skill card. A normal person would have been poisoned to death long ago. But Su Yu was an awakened, her physical fitness was enhanced, and she had just used a skill card. Her body wasn't so fragile, which is why she had managed to hold on until now. Ling wanted to help, but she didn't have any healing abilities or medical knowledge. Right? We can find that boat doctor. Su Yu's eyes lit up for a moment, but then dimmed again. But aren't you 2 enemies? Idiot. She doesn't know my survivor ID or my exact location. How would she know it's me? Ling immediately opened the light screen and sent a private message to the stranger. Can you treat snake bites? She didn't ask where the doctor was or whether she would treat her because that would raise suspicion. As an outsider, she shouldn't know what had happened to the doctor. Yes, the treatment fee is 1 upgrade card. As expected, the doctor replied immediately. Although she was no longer at her original coordinates, her reputation had spread, and there was no reason to refuse business. I can't move easily right now. You'll have to come to me. Lee, okay, but that will cost extra. Give me your coordinates. 10, 11. Lee, 3 upgrade cards. Also, I need to see the wound and the cards you have. Seeing how cautious the doctor was, Ling smiled and immediately took 2 photos with her ring. This is all I have. I hope you can save me. I can offer resources as collateral if it's not enough. Of course, she didn't have 3 upgrade cards. The photos only showed 1 upgrade card, 1 enhancement card, and 2 location cards. On the contrary, if she had actually sent a photo of 3 upgrade cards, it would have aroused the doctor's suspicion again. Because the average survivor wouldn't possibly have so many upgrade cards, and just happened to have them in stock. In fact, this was the resource situation for the vast majority of survivors. After a moment, the reply came. Lee, deal. I'll be there in 3 hours. She agreed, and Ling's lips curved into a smile. She looked at Su Yu. Let's go. We'll take the boat there first. Their island coordinates were too sensitive. Of course, they couldn't use them. Fortunately, after their fight, Ling's boat had been upgraded, so she didn't have to worry about being recognized. She won't run away when she sees you, will she? Su Yu was still a little worried as she followed Ling onto the boat. Don't worry, I won't show myself. By the time she realizes it's me, it'll be too late. Remember, you're Survivor 520 now. Ling helped her sit down in the cabin and started the boat. Hold on for 3 more hours. Chapter 123, A Favor. Ling quickly steered the boat to the agreed-upon coordinates, dropped anchor, and quietly waited for the Xinu's arrival. She had brought a fan and placed the solar panel outside, providing a cooling breeze for Su Yu inside the makeshift shelter on the boat. Drink some water and hold on a little longer. She'll be here soon, Ling comforted, handing Su Yu a cup of water. I'm not that fragile. I can handle it, Su Yu said with a wan smile, offering a confident reassurance. Seeing that her condition hadn't worsened, Ling breathed a sigh of relief. Time ticked by, and soon a sailboat appeared on the horizon, heading straight for them. The locator began displaying its real-time coordinates. Ling picked up the binoculars, confirmed it was the right boat, and then hid inside the cabin to wait. When the 2 boats were 500 meters apart, the Xinu stopped, dropping anchor. She glanced at Ling's boat, then jumped into the sea. Quite cautious, Ling thought, just as the water around the boat began to churn. Suddenly, a geyser erupted, the water coalescing into the form of a young woman. "Your survivor?" Ling began. Then her eyes locked onto Ling inside the cabin. Her pupils constricted. Thinking this was a trap, she immediately prepared to dive back into the ocean. "Try it and see if you can escape." Ling's voice rang out, a threat meant to stop her. "Our previous encounter is water under the bridge. This time, I'm asking for your help. Payment will be provided as agreed." "You don't need to be so nervous," Ling added quickly, softening her tone. Ling froze. At this distance, she couldn't escape. Hearing the second part of the message, she carefully observed the situation on the boat. A young woman about her age, her legs swollen and purple, her face pale, clearly suffering from a snake bite. And Ling hadn't lied. "Fine, I believe you." Ling stepped onto the boat and entered the cabin. She had no choice. She approached Suyu and began to examine the wound. And Ling deliberately moved away, allowing Ling to lower her guard, though she herself remained vigilant, wary of any tricks. "Don't worry, I keep my word," Ling said. "But I advise you not to try anything funny," she added. "Her life is worth a lot more than yours." Ling paused. "So much talk. I have professional ethics. I'm not a quack." Crouching beside Suyu, she gently touched the wound and activated her ability. This time, the water flowing from her palm was a pale green. It washed away the bruised blood and then spread to envelop the entire area. As she concentrated, Suyu held her breath, and Ling watched quietly. The poison blood, as if under Liu's control, flowed back out of Suyu's leg. Liu then flung the venomous blood into the sea. The purple color on Suyu's leg gradually receded, and the swelling subsided under Liu's power. "That's amazing," Suyu murmured, incredulous. She could clearly feel the injury healing, though she was still weak. "There. Rest for a few days and you'll be fine," Liu said, standing and habitually clapping her hands together. Ling stepped forward, offering the cards. "Thank you. This is your teammate? You don't live on the boat, do you?" Liu asked, instead of taking the cards. "Obviously. If she's not my teammate, is she yours?" Ling glared. Liu laughed. My, look at you, actually needing help. I like you, so I won't take the cards. Goodbye. Looking forward to our next meeting." With that, Liu stepped back and fell backwards into the sea, disappearing from sight. A moment later, she reappeared on her own boat, waving to them. Ling remained still, while Suyu waved back enthusiastically. As Liu sailed away, Suyu asked, puzzled, "What a strange person. She doesn't seem that bad." She's smart," Ling replied, her gaze returning to Suyu. "How do you feel?" "A little weak, but otherwise fine," Suyu said, moving her leg experimentally. "Good. Let's head back." With the whir of the propellers, they started back towards their island. Ling, "Why do you think she refused payment?" Suyu asked on the way. "Isn't that good?" "We got a bargain," Ling said, a touch of amusement in her voice. "Ah, but now we owe her a favor," Suyu realized. "That's why I said she's smart. But we hold the cards. Whether we acknowledge the debt is up to us," Ling explained. Perhaps Liu admired Ling's character, or perhaps her strength. She had deliberately used this treatment to earn a favor. It not only eased the tension between them, but also potentially secured future assistance if needed. She wasn't afraid of Ling refusing. If she had misjudged Ling, it wouldn't matter. The treatment was a small price to pay. Besides, in this vast ocean, she was a rare doctor. Who could refuse a doctor's goodwill? Indeed, everyone was bound to get injured eventually. Doctors were extremely valuable in this apocalyptic world. They quickly returned to their island, and Ling used the cards to upgrade Suyu's boat. Suyu needed to rest for the next few days, and Ling decided against further exploration for now. Just rest up these next few days. The resource islands are getting more dangerous. We might need to wait until we reach the next survival island, Ling advised, heading off to prepare lunch. Okay, Suyu agreed. She felt weak and drained, her body not yet fully recovered. Even guarding the island felt like a struggle in her current state. Lunch was soon ready. They sat facing each other, enjoying the plentiful food. Ling, thank you, Suyu said suddenly. Ling smiled and waved her hand dismissively. Don't mention it. We're teammates. It's what we do. Besides, it was just a small thing. Chapter 124, The Two-Story House. 4 days passed in a flash. During this time, Ling and Suyu stayed on their island, diligently fishing for supplies instead of venturing out to resource islands. Despite their base's easily noticeable location at the origin point, no unexpected visitors, or deliveries, as they jokingly called them, arrived. This left Ling, perpetually bored, a little disappointed. Suyu had fully recovered and was once again brimming with energy. Today marked the 13th day since their return from the previous survival island, meaning that in 2 days, all survivors would be transported to the next one. In the channel chat, the flurry of team formation continued, but with the third island looming, everyone felt the pressure. No one could be certain of their survival. Received blessing pendant bonus. Fortune smiles upon you. No doubt about it, you are the luckiest of the lucky. Remaining time, 17 hours, 40 minutes, 55 seconds. After so many days, my good luck is finally back, Ling said excitedly. The moment they woke up, she activated the day's blessing. After breakfast, Suyu suggested, should we explore another resource island before entering the survival island? No need, Ling replied with a confident smile. I feel incredibly lucky today. It's time to open those crates. Trust me, the rewards will be no less than a resource island. Huh. While luck was an elusive concept, Suyu trusted Ling. All right, I'll go fishing then. You go open the crates. They divided the tasks and set to work. After days of accumulation, the basement was practically overflowing with crates. Locked and unlocked, they were stacked against the walls and extended outwards, leaving only a small space near the entrance. There were well over 100 crates. Let's see just how lucky I can get, Ling muttered, heading to the basement with a flashlight. Using her ability, she levitated the topmost crate towards her. Without hesitation, she opened it. Food. She casually tossed the contents behind her, disassembled the crate, and moved on to the next one. Materials. Cards. More food. Then a locked crate appeared. Damn it. Ling sliced through the lock with her sword and opened the crate. Red. An upgrade card. Not bad. Let's continue. 2 hours later, the basement was a mess, but not a single crate remained unopened. The floor was strewn with supplies, materials, food, and nails from the disassembled crates. Ling held a stack of cards, containing almost every type except for a few specific ones. She then spent over an hour cleaning up the basement before returning to the first floor. Suyu was still fishing by the shore, several crates already piled beside her. Ling ignored those for now and looked at the cards in her hand, a smile playing on her lips. The food and materials were secondary. The most valuable were these cards, the key to rapid development for any survivor. There were 4 item cards, an electric fan, a light bulb, a power strip, and a thermometer. The first 2 were common household appliances, perfect for replacing the dim, constantly lit lamp in the house with something brighter, moving the old lamp to the basement. Now we have 2 fans. Ling was pleased. Her luck was indeed exceptional. She connected the light bulb to the generator using the power strip and fixed it to the ceiling. The light switch, a classic pull string, hung near the doorway. She then used a nail to hang the thermometer on the wall next to the clock. It read 42 degrees Celsius. It was fortunate they were awakened, with much higher resistance than ordinary people. Next, she examined the 4 building cards she had found: a sofa, a coffee table, a flower bed, and a seawall. Seawall building card. Coastal protection is everyone's responsibility. Required materials: wood *500, lus *200, scrap iron *100. Reward: 5 points. The seawall would create a barrier around the island to protect against the erosion of strong waves. Though the sea was calm now, there was no guarantee it would remain that way. Like the wooden decking Ling had built earlier, the seawall would automatically extend as the island expanded. She wasn't sure yet if it could be upgraded. Being made of wood, it sounded rather fragile. Ling quickly constructed all the new items. The house was becoming increasingly modern. Next came the most numerous cards, 11 enhancement cards. Ling distributed them evenly, enhancing almost every useful building. The boat, X2. The house, the table, the backpacks, X2. The warehouse, the farm, the pasture, and the navigation locator, X2. The house's interior was completely transformed. She could hardly believe it had evolved from a simple tint to what it was now. Looking at the 3 remaining upgrade cards, Ling smiled. Upgrading weapons wouldn't make a significant difference for them, at least not compared to this. She decided to go big and use all 3 upgrade cards on one thing: their house. Upgrade cards only improve the quality of the house, not its size, so there was no need to worry about the house-to-island size ratio. The 3 red cards vanished in her hand, and instantly, the house was upgraded. From inside, she couldn't see the whole structure, but she noticed new stairs leading upwards from the basement. The house now had a second floor. The first floor had become a 3-bedroom, 2-living-room layout, but the basic decoration remained unchanged, as that was separate from the house itself. She went upstairs. Unlike the first floor, the second floor had 4 rooms, and the 2 sun-facing rooms even had balconies, though they were empty. Just then, Siyu looked back from the shore. Her jaw dropped. Whoa! Chapter 125. Final preparations before landing. And Ling, what did you do? Suyu exclaimed, staring at the 2-story house in disbelief, her eyes meeting Ling's from the second-floor balcony. She had been fishing when she noticed a new, 5-foot-tall wooden fence encircling the island. The planks were tightly fitted, seemingly waterproof. Knowing Ling was responsible, she turned back to their house, only to find it replaced by this impressive structure. Just used 3 upgrade cards, and Ling replied casually, a faint smile playing on her lips. If I hadn't been at the shore the whole time, I wouldn't have recognized it. Suyu entered the house, taking in the new additions with astonishment. Told you my luck was amazing today, and Ling said, descending the stairs. What do you think? Suyu's eyes lit up. So, if we upgraded a few more times, we could live in a villa? Theoretically, yes, and Ling agreed, assuming they could get enough upgrade cards. Yay, I've never lived in a villa before. Let's work hard for our villa. Suyu, suddenly full of energy, excitedly went to prepare lunch. While Suyu cooked, and Ling checked the trading post for anything useful. She was looking for more light bulbs, which were currently considered impractical by most survivors and relatively easy to obtain, making them ideal trade targets. Now that they had a larger house, a single light bulb wasn't sufficient for 2 floors. There was no rush, however. With the perpetual daylight, light bulbs weren't essential. Compared to other times, the prices were even lower now. Although survivors weren't short on food, most of it consisted of preserved, pre-packaged meals. And Ling, on the other hand, had fresh meat, a much more valuable commodity. The ring's appraisal was never wrong. Within the span of lunch, and Ling traded for 2 light bulb item cards. The styles differed, but they were functional. After lunch, and Ling, wanting to capitalize on her fortune smiles upon you blessing, decided to locate and head to another resource island. With the next survival island imminent, she wanted to boost their resources as much as possible. Be careful, Suyu cautioned as Ling prepared to leave. This is probably when all the survivors are most active. And Ling chuckled. Don't worry about me. You should be the one being careful. She left the pistol with Suyu, their greatest safeguard against other survivors. Boarding her boat, she waved goodbye. I'm off. Have a safe trip, Suyu replied. How can I have a trip without wind? And Ling joked as her boat sailed away, quickly disappearing from Suyu's view. The coordinates this time were 33-29, closer than the last island. Perhaps due to the blessing, and Ling had a hunch this would be an ordinary island. Soon, the island came into view. A typical, unremarkable tropical island. The kind with a bit of everything, but nothing in abundance. And Ling's goal was clear. Find the skill card. Food, wood, minerals, fresh water. All took a back seat. As she flew around the island on her sword, she quickly spotted an altar near the center, with a treasure chest on top. Unlike the previous add up to 15 game, this time there were 3 stone dice. 1 chance. Roll a high number and double the reward. Fail, and the island sinks into the ocean. Countdown. 59, 58, 57. The timer started the moment and Ling stepped onto the altar. Had she not approached, she could have safely gathered resources. Now, there was no turning back. Ideally, she would have left this gamble for last. Purely luck-based, huh? And Ling almost laughed. She confidently picked up the 3 dice and tossed them without a second thought. 3 sixes. 18. With a click, the chest opened. Like the previous island, it contained 2 skill cards. and Ling used them immediately. Current skill level, LV, 8 basic swordsmanship. Now, she could casually gather some resources. On her way to the altar, she had noticed an abundance of resin, a valuable and currently scarce resource for them. She set to work. And Ling returned the next day, her boat laden with supplies. It was the 14th day since returning from the last survival island, the final day before entering the next one. You had lunch ready. You seem to be in a good mood, Suyu observed. Of course. I got tons of resin, and Ling replied with a grin. What's that for? Isn't it just for making rockets? Suyu asked, puzzled. No, this is liquid resin, and it won't solidify in this heat. We can pour it into bottles, like we did with the gasoline. And Ling demonstrated. The resin, highly flammable, would be effective against swarms of insects or snakes. I see, Suyu said, understanding dawning. And Ling, do you think our next island will be similar to this one? The last one was a desert. This time, it won't be a snow mountain, will it? Not necessarily. We've only been to 2, or just 1 if you don't count the starting island. There's no pattern, but I have a feeling this next one might be unexpected. And Ling felt things were heading in a strange direction. Oh no, don't tell me the survival rate is going to drop again? Suyu worried. If her teammate on the second island hadn't been in Ling, someone who perfectly complemented her weaknesses, she feared she might not have made it. Whatever it is, it's always best to be prepared, and Ling reminded her. Rest this afternoon and get a good night's sleep. We need to be ready for the transfer at dawn. Okay, Suyu agreed. Chapter 126. Playing the Human World. Ugh, so cold. And Ling groggily pulled the blanket beside her over herself. Even the hot air from the electric fan that had been running not far away seemed to have dissipated. Wait, why would it be cold? The next second, she abruptly opened her eyes. Looking out the window, the outside was pitch black. And Ling instantly sat up. It's dark? She lowered her head to look at the pendant around her neck. The remaining time displayed on it was 2 hours, meaning it was 10 o'clock at night. It seemed that the high noon scorching sun event had also ended with the imminent arrival of the survival island. And Ling immediately got out of bed, put on her clothes, and considering the special weather changes, she put her hoodie back on. After all, the environment on the survival island was unpredictable. Standing on the balcony, she looked out at the dark sea. The sea breeze blowing against her face was incredibly cool. After the house was upgraded to 2 floors, the 2 of them had coincidentally moved into these 2 sun-facing rooms. Knock, knock, knock. And Ling knocked on the door, then directly pushed it open and walked in. It's dark, wake up. Suyu, who was sprawled out in a big shape, was still a bit groggy. Just as she was about to turn over and continue sleeping, she opened her eyes and saw the darkness outside. Huh. I wondered why it was so cool today. She instantly sat up and ran a hand through her hair. What time is it? 10 o'clock. Then it's definitely time to eat something and set off. Suyu started to get dressed. And Ling had already gotten used to her behavior over the past few days and no longer bothered to avoid it. They were both women anyway. What was there to be shy about? Arriving downstairs, they glanced at the thermometer on the wall. 14 degrees Celsius, it seemed everything had returned to normal. With the survival island about to begin, neither of them was in the mood to prepare a lavish meal, so they just ate something simple to make do. They had packed all the necessary supplies into their backpacks before going to sleep. Now, the only thing they could do was wait quietly. I hope we can enter the same island, Suyu said, resting her head on her hand, her brows slightly furrowed. Even now, she was still a bit nervous. Yeah. And Ling also nodded. With a teammate, the chances of survival could be greatly increased. Rather than trusting a stranger, she felt it was better to trust herself. Time quickly passed, minute by minute, and the arrival of midnight grew closer and closer. The survivors in the channel chat all expressed a feeling of irresistible tension. The difficulty of the survival island increased in stages after becoming a professional. Although everyone was now a superhuman, the pressure was still very high. As for ordinary people, the beginner island was already life-threatening. Time. 23:59. It's time. And Ling picked up her backpack and stood face to face with Suyu, who was nervously clutching her hand. The next second, time zeroed out. They both felt their vision turning upside down, and everything around them became blurry. After a few seconds of mental blackout, and Ling instantly regained control of her body and abruptly opened her eyes, observing her surroundings. An old, yellowed electric light bulb hung in the center of the room, emitting a dim, blackish light that a strange, silent atmosphere completely enveloped the room. What unfolded before Ling was a narrow corridor, her gaze extending to the dim end of the room. She first observed herself, finding that she was currently sitting on a chair, her hands and feet completely shackled. She tried to struggle, but couldn't move at all. Only a red button on the right armrest caught her attention. On both sides, a line of 10 people, like her, were bound to chairs. These people were arranged in a straight line along the edge of the room, their gazes directed towards the opposite end. At the same time, the other 9 people woke up one after another, their expressions a mixture of anger and panic as they struggled incessantly. Clang, clang. The sound of metal colliding against the chairs filled the silent room with a cacophony of noise. What the hell is going on? Isn't this the survival island? Why have we been kidnapped? Damn it, I can't use my ability. Me neither. Hearing this, everyone became even more panicked. And Ling also tried, discovering that her ability had also disappeared. Even worse, her physical fitness had regressed to the level of an ordinary person. Here, this was fatal for a girl like her. And with her hands bound, she couldn't even use her prayer. Just then, the rings of all 10 people simultaneously emitted a white light, and a huge light screen appeared before their eyes. Island name: Playing the Human World. Objective: win 10 games or collect enough chips to. Introduction: this is a paradise created by a madman. He is a crazy gambler, and here, what's gambled is not money, but lives. Here, all human desires can be satisfied. Basic rules. 1. The shortest interval between all games on the island is 1 day, and the longest is no more than 3 days. 2. The initial victory reward is 2 points. Each time a game is won, the points will double, and an equal amount of experience will be obtained. 3. All professional abilities are prohibited on the island except in special scenarios. Violating the game rules will result in punishment, and the opponent will be declared the winner. Looking at the huge light screen prompt before them, everyone present fell silent. This island had directly dragged the hard-earned strength of the superhumans back to square one, leaving them to rely on the elusive concept of luck as ordinary people to achieve victory. How could this not be terrifying? What a joke, someone said in despair, their voice laced with hopelessness. Everyone knew this was the survival island. No one could break the rules. With a bang, the darkness at the end of the room was dispelled by the dim light emanating from the tungsten filament bulb overhead. Under the light, facing the 10 people, were 10 square boxes. No one knew what they were at the end of the countdown. The first person to press the red button on their right hand will be released from their restraints. Among the 10 boxes at the end, only one contains poison. Consuming the pill will be considered a victory and allow you to leave. Countdown: 10, 9, 8. A mechanical voice that was indistinguishable as male or female echoed throughout the room. Everyone was stunned for a moment, and then became nervous. The game was simple. It was a test of reaction speed. At the very beginning, the probability of drawing the poison was the lowest. The later it became, the greater the possibility of becoming the unlucky one. But wasn't the 50-meter distance between them and the button a bit excessive? Just as Ling was pondering, the countdown ended, and she and all the other survivors pressed the red button on their right side almost simultaneously. Click. Chapter 127. Victory in Sight. Ha 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 ha, a bunch of idiots trying to compete with me in reaction speed. I practice every day. To everyone's surprise, it was a seemingly weak and skinny young man whose chair restraints were released first. He wore glasses, had a face full of acne, and was a bit dark-skinned. The whole person looked frail and weak. Perhaps he didn't expect that the skills he painstakingly practiced every day would come in handy on this day. At this moment, the other 9 people felt a mix of resentment and regret. Why couldn't their reaction speed be a little faster? The glasses-wearing man excitedly strode towards the opposite end, even breaking into a run for the last 3 steps. He quickly arrived in front of the boxes and began to carefully examine them. But the size and shape of each box were exactly the same, and there was no way to tell them apart. Helplessly, he chose the box at the very edge. After all, in common perception, the edge position is usually less likely to be the winner. Opening the box, he found a black pill inside, about the size of a capsule. He gritted his teeth, tilted his head back, and directly swallowed the pill. The atmosphere in the room was so tense that you could hear everyone's breathing and heartbeats. Since they couldn't be the first, everyone hoped that the glasses-wearing man would get lucky on his first try, so they could directly achieve victory. But unfortunately, the man's luck wasn't that good. As a door on the side slowly opened, he knew he had won. Ha 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 ha. He laughed heartily, and even turned back to provocatively glance at the remaining 9 people before leaving. The door to the room slowly closed, and everything returned to its original state, except that the second chair on the left was now empty. The survival rate had now dropped from the initial 90% to 89%. Fortunately, this probability was still acceptable to everyone for the time being. Number of people released this round, 2 countdown, 59, 58, 57. The mechanical voice sounded again in the room, and this time everyone's expressions were tense, and they were prepared. As the countdown reached 0, with a click, the restraints of 2 chairs were instantly released. Ling's expression was somewhat serious. This time, she still hadn't managed to seize the initiative. With the same physical fitness as an ordinary person, her frail body had no advantage. This time, a man and a woman were released. The woman was alluring and graceful, although her clothes were a bit dirty. The man was a middle-aged man with a stubbly beard, giving a first impression of sloppiness. No way. Do you guys also have special skills? The young man next to Ling muttered in despair. Heh, it's normal to have good hand skills after a long time of accumulation. With enough time, your reaction speed naturally becomes faster. Another burly man who was still trapped spat and sarcastically mocked the 2 who had been freed. But the man and woman ignored their taunts and almost instinctively rushed towards the end. Ling finally understood what the 50-meter buffer distance was for. Whoever picked first could secure that 89% survival rate, while the latter would only have about an 88% chance. Although it was only a slight 1% difference, no one wanted to miss out. What if they just happened to get lucky? Despite the man's unkempt appearance, in this desperate environment, the woman's speed couldn't keep up with his. He quickly reached the end. The man casually selected a box, immediately opened it, and swallowed the pill. The woman, realizing she couldn't match the man's speed, gave up on competing and unhurriedly walked towards the end. Idiots. At this moment, the burly man who was previously trapped in his chair revealed a cold smile and cursed the 2. Ling frowned upon hearing this. This time, she had to break free because she had vaguely guessed what the other man was thinking. Sure enough, neither the man nor the woman were so unlucky, and they both successfully left the room. Number of people released this round, 3. Countdown, 59, 58, 57. The countdown sound rang out again, and this time the number of people released increased again. Undoubtedly, following this pattern, the remaining 4 people would be released simultaneously in the final round. The moment the countdown reached 0, Ling decisively pressed the red button on her right hand. Click. The restraints of the 3 were simultaneously released, but unfortunately, she was still not among them. Why was this happening? Ling couldn't understand. Her reaction speed was no slower than the others each time, so why wasn't she being released? Could it be that the people who pressed the button at the same time were randomly chosen for release? She turned her head to the side and saw that the burly man who was 1 seat away was also stuck in place. Fortunately, this way, there was nothing to worry about. The 3 released people swarmed forward, rushing towards the end of the corridor like they were in a 100-meter race. The young man beside Ling was the fastest. His muscle lines were very defined, and he looked like an athlete. It wasn't until all 4 had taken their pills and no one had died from poisoning that Ling seemed to have figured out the trick. She made a bold assumption that before all the chairs were opened, there might not be any poison in the boxes at all. In other words, no matter how they chose, nothing would happen to them. This dilemma was left for the last 4 people because at that point the survival rate would become 75%. Of course, this was theoretical. The slowest person would certainly die, so what would he do? A desperate counterattack, killing the 3 people in front of him. This wasn't breaking the rules. The system would naturally allow it. It probably couldn't wait for a few more people to die. Sure enough, after taking the pills, all 3 people left the room with relieved expressions. Only 4 people remained trapped in their chairs in the room, 1 woman and 3 men. Number of people released this round, 4. Countdown, 59, 58, 57. As the countdown began, No one put their right hand on the red button anymore. No one was stupid. They could all figure that out. The final round would definitely be cruel, so they were already prepared, ready to take out their weapons from their backpacks at any time. At the same time, they turned their heads to observe each other, their gazes invariably landing on Ling. At this time, the woman was the weakest, and naturally, she would be the first to be eliminated. After that would be the decisive moment for the three men, because a 75% survival rate was still very high, and it was something they had to fight for. If they fell behind, they would only have 67% and 50%, and no one dared to bet on that half chance. Click. Just then, the countdown ended, and the chairs opened automatically even without anyone pressing the buttons. In an instant, the man on the far side darted forward like an arrow, but the man next to him had been anticipating this and directly tackled him to the ground. The two immediately started grappling. Meanwhile, the burly man who had been beside Ling also took out a dagger from his backpack, looking at her with a smile, a T this time. Whoever took the initiative to approach would be attacked by the others, so he had to deal with the woman in front of him first. Seeing this, Ling didn't show the slightest panic, but instead, a cold smile appeared on her face. Chapter 128, The First Game. Bang! A thunderous gunshot echoed through the room, the reverberations lingering long after, assaulting the eardrums of everyone present. A gaping, bloody hole appeared in the forehead of the burly man wielding the dagger. His eyes glazed over, and his body slumped backward heavily. The two figures grappling beside him instantly froze, staring dumbfounded at Ling, who held the smoking gun. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air, a chilling reminder of what had just transpired. Ling lowered the gun, her expression cold and indifferent as she walked towards the far end of the room. The two remaining survivors behind her exhaled in relief, but only dared to watch her go, afraid to make any sudden movements. Neither of them had expected the seemingly weakest person in the room to possess a firearm. They were also thankful that they hadn't been the ones to attack her just now. Ling holstered her weapon. The single shot had been enough to intimidate them. If necessary, she wouldn't hesitate to waste 2 more bullets. Turning her back to them, she twirled a pendant hanging around her neck. Amulet of Fortune buff activated. Unbelievable luck is now on your side. You are the epitome of fortune. Remaining time, 23 hours, 30 minutes, 20 seconds. Ling smiled. Without hesitation, she grabbed a nearby box, opened it, and swallowed the pill inside. At this moment, a 75% survival probability felt like a guaranteed 100% to her. Those favored by Lady Luck had nothing to fear. Creak. A hidden door beside her slowly opened. Ling didn't hesitate and exited the room. Simultaneously, the 2 stunned survivors left in the room immediately resumed their deadly struggle. She traversed a long, dimly lit corridor lined with numerous rooms. Other survivors were continuously emerging from these rooms. It seemed these were the ones who had managed to survive. They were all silent, walking towards the exit without attempting to converse with the strangers around them. The only commonality was the look of relief on their faces, a relief that no one could share. Soon, Ling, alone, reached the exit. Contrary to her expectation of finding herself on a vast island, she was still within an enormous indoor space. The space was vast, decorated predominantly in black and gold. A massive, ornate chandelier hanging overhead emitted a warm glow. The area was filled with unfamiliar equipment and gaming machines, creating the impression of a massive underground casino. It was like something out of a television drama, only much larger and more magnificent. The casino was already teeming with survivors, at least 400 or 500 by her estimate, and more were continuously pouring in through the edges of the rear walls. The scale of this survival island was unprecedented, and Ling began to survey her surroundings. The massive, enclosed space was at least a kilometer across, with no windows or exits in sight. Only a few staircases leading to a second floor were visible at the far end. In other words, everyone who had reached the island would be spending their time within this enclosed space, which hardly resembled an island at all. Games cleared, 0. Accumulated points, 2. At that moment, a holographic prompt appeared, along with a floor plan of the entire area displayed at the bottom. That just now didn't count as a game? Ling frowned slightly as she studied the floor plan. At least, food and lodging were provided here, although it was limited to a maximum of 10 days. The entire space was roughly divided into 3 main areas: the food zone, the living zone, and the game zone. Each zone was further subdivided. For example, the game zone listed various types of games, but only general categories were visible. The specific rules remained hidden. Most of the survivors were currently examining the map provided by the holographic display. Some headed to the living zone, others to the food zone, and still others chose to wander the game zone, inspecting the rules of various games. Upon entering the casino, a 24-hour countdown had begun. All they had to do was participate in a single game before the time ran out. If they participated now, they could leave the island a day early, shortening their stay to 9 days. Ling closed the holographic display and began to stroll through the game zone. Before participating in any game, she needed to understand the situation to some extent. At least, in her current state, she could opt for a game that relied purely on luck. She walked alone through the vast casino, ignoring the survivors moving around her. After a circuit of the area, she realized the games came in a wide variety, ranging from simple to complex, but all of them were familiar. The simplest was rock, paper, scissors, a 3-round match that could determine a survivor's fate in just 2 minutes. Then there were blackjack, golden flower, stud poker, slot machines, roulette, dice, and so on. These could still be considered games of chance, to some extent. The games beyond those relied more on skill than luck. Examples included billiards, chess, Go, and other games requiring proficiency. These were also the games that currently attracted the largest crowds of survivors. After all, no one was willing to entrust their life to the whims of fate. Everyone seemed eager to try, but no one dared to be the first to sit in the restrictive metal chairs. They were all still observing and waiting. Ling glanced around, losing interest, and turned to leave. She was better suited for games based purely on luck. These conventional games still required a degree of skill that she completely lacked. Maybe I should try rock, paper, scissors, she thought. Such a simple game shouldn't require much skill, right? Just then, she passed a table with 2 piles of game pieces and a board inscribed with various animals. Animal chess? She paused, surprised. This game should also be primarily based on luck. Daily game rule check remaining 3 times? There's a limit on checks? And Ling realized. It seemed this was designed to prevent survivors from gaining extensive knowledge of all the game rules. While they could exchange information with each other, no one could be sure if another survivor was providing accurate information. After all, survivors were enemies, and absolute trust between them was impossible. This would do. And Ling made up her mind and touched the holographic display with her finger. The game rules immediately appeared before her eyes. She glanced around and noticed that no one was looking at her strangely. So that's how it is. Only I can see this information. And Ling immediately began to study the game rules in front of her. Chapter 129. Crushing the Psychological Defense. Game name: Death Animal Chess. Rules: the game is divided into red and blue sides. The red side has 5 pieces: elephant, lion, tiger, leopard, and dog. The blue side has 5 pieces: lion, tiger, leopard, dog, and rat. Each round, both players place a piece face down on the table. After pressing the red button, the game starts, and the pieces are revealed to compare their ranks. Once the game begins, pieces cannot be changed. Each piece can only be used once per round. In the event of a tie, both pieces are discarded. Piece ranks from highest to lowest: elephant, lion, tiger, leopard, dog, rat. The rat is the only piece that can defeat the elephant. Note: the dealer will play as the blue side. The game is best of 3. Players may leave if no one participates after 1 hour. The game rules were simple, a pure test of luck, which was exactly what Ling wanted at the moment. The only disadvantage was that if she initiated the game, she would be playing with the weaker side's pieces. Clearly, the blue side's pieces were weaker. The rat, the smallest piece, could only defeat the elephant, while the red side's elephant could instantly defeat all other pieces except the rat. Once the blue side's rat was captured, the entire game would be over. With such favorable odds for the red side, it would be difficult for most survivors to resist the temptation. After reviewing the game rules, participating was straightforward: simply sit in the chair. And Ling had made her decision. She sat down without hesitation, and the chair made clicking sounds as it firmly locked her in place, leaving only her hands free to move. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, all the lights in the room went out, except for some ambient lights that illuminated the dimly lit casino. A bright spotlight above Ling's head switched on, like a stage light, instantly drawing everyone's attention to the white-haired girl in the chair. Simultaneously, a massive holographic screen appeared above her head. Game. Death Animal Chess. Awaiting start. Someone's actually playing. Let's go take a look. Soon, a crowd surrounded Ling. The game zone had a designated area, and these survivors couldn't get too close, so they formed a circle 3 to 5 meters away, watching the girl in the chair. As Ling sat down, the rules of Death Animal Chess were displayed, eliminating the need for others to check them again. The only person in the entire casino brave enough to start a game was a woman. Soon, everyone's attention was captivated by the game rules displayed above her head. They discussed and pondered, their minds seemingly making some sort of resolution. The game rules were obviously unfair. No one wanted to miss the chance to take advantage of this fool before them, since no one willingly wanted to sit on the blue side. Damn it, I've been unlucky my whole life. If I lose even this, then I'll just die. A man cursed, pushing through the crowd to participate, but someone was faster than him. With a click, the chair locked the other person in place, and the game rules and status above instantly changed to 9 large characters. Death Animal Chess Game Start. It's truly my honor to have a thrilling game with a beautiful woman. Sitting across from Ling was a young man with dyed yellow hair slicked back and a half-visible black tattoo on his collarbone that read, "If I become a demon." He wore a mischievous, somewhat thug-like grin, the epitome of a swaggering, street-smart young man. Ling couldn't be bothered to respond. She directly selected a piece from her set, flipped it face down onto the table, and pressed the red button, signifying she could no longer change her piece. Oh, the beauty is quite confident. Huh? Too bad this is a life-or-death game. I can't afford to show any mercy to such a pretty face. Otherwise, I'd really like to have some fun with you. The man spoke casually, but being underestimated by a girl made him lose face. Almost without thinking, he placed his piece on the table. I'll make you lose the first round. The man looked at Ling, and when he saw a subtle smile on her face, he was momentarily stunned. No, you're trying to bluff me. You're still too green. As he said this, the man took back his piece from the table, changed it, and confidently pressed the red button. Sigh, that girl's expression gave it away. She's doomed now. Such a pretty girl, too bad. As a tisk, people around them began to murmur, pitying the girl. If the rat is captured, then she'll lose this round for sure. When they both revealed their pieces, the surrounding crowd was stunned. What? The man exclaimed, his face filled with disbelief. Both sides had played the lion. This round was a tie. How can you not have the rat? This is impossible. The man realized he had been tricked, but he quickly composed himself, as his odds of winning were still high. Ling didn't hesitate. She quickly picked another piece and pressed the red button on the table. Even the surrounding people couldn't understand the girl's actions. Was it confidence or just pure luck? The man also fell silent, looking at the 4 cards in his hand indecisively. He had been tricked in the first round. Could this be a trap? She's forcing me to play the elephant this round. She's deliberately acting so confident to crush my psychological defense. Why should I gamble with her? I just need to play my cards from highest to lowest. Once she makes a wrong judgment and her rat is captured, I'll win for sure. Playing the elephant might lead to a loss, but playing other cards definitely won't. After a moment of brainstorming, the man finally decided on his play. As he pressed the red button, both players' cards were revealed. Both sides played the tiger. Another tie. As these 2 pieces were discarded, Ling immediately flipped another pre-selected piece face down on the table and confidently pressed the button as before. At this point, the man was starting to panic. This must be a coincidence, definitely a coincidence. I don't believe you'll dare to keep gambling like this. He took out a piece and pressed the button. It was the leopard. Another tie. This is impossible. The man was on the verge of collapse. He was sweating profusely and completely panicked. He was left with only an elephant and a dog. The opponent had a rat and a dog, bringing the win rate to 50/50. His previous advantage was gone. The surrounding survivors held their breath, falling silent, quietly observing the outcome of the first game in the casino. Ling remained confident as always. Despite being at a disadvantage, she consistently took the initiative. The man across from her looked at the 2 remaining pieces in his hand, his hands trembling uncontrollably. No, no, I haven't lost yet. Calm down, calm down. Chapter 130. An Easy Victory. The man forced himself to calm down. He still had a 50% chance of winning, so there was no need to worry. The opponent had figured out his thoughts and had been playing cards in decreasing order from the beginning. At this moment, she must think she had crushed his psychological defense and would try to reverse the situation by using the rat to defeat the elephant, making a comeback. Little did she know that he had already seen through her plan. That card must be the rat. No. Would she continue her previous strategy and play the dog? Impossible. In her eyes, he must have completely lost his mind. Or maybe she thought he had seen through her trick and would definitely play the elephant. The man laughed. You are indeed very powerful, but I have seen through your plan. The opponent's card was already decided, so the man had nothing to worry about. He directly placed his card face down on the table and pressed the button. The surrounding survivors were also staring intently, anticipating the final result. The man confidently flipped his card over, revealing it to be a dog. What? Delaying time is useless. Accept your fate. And Ling ignored him and reached out to reveal her piece on the table. The people around gasped. It was also a dog. What? Death Animal Chess. Blue side wins. The holographic announcement appeared at that moment. There was no need to continue the game any further. However, the chairs did not unlock because the game rules were best of 3. So stupid. Even with the advantage of the red side, he managed to lose. This kind of person should just die. Why even bother competing? Exactly. The surrounding survivors were murmuring. They didn't praise Ling for winning the game. Instead, they cursed the man's stupidity. The man's clothes were soaked with sweat. He hadn't expected to be completely manipulated by his opponent from start to finish. Hearing the discussions around him, he was furious but helpless. Where did he go wrong? Perhaps he had overcomplicated his opponent's strategy, and she had actually won purely by luck? Soon, Ling tidied up the chess pieces, and the second round of the game officially began. As in the previous round, she still looked unconcerned, casually placing a piece on the table and pressing the button. This moment, however, the man hesitated. He knew very well what he would face if he lost this round. Dude, just be confident. That's all it takes, a young man shouted from the sidelines. Hearing this, the man was instantly inspired and reacted. His hesitation immediately turned into decisiveness, and he promptly placed a piece on the table and pressed the button. Yes, confidence is everything. Why overthink it? He forced a smile, his heart racing but maintaining a calm facade. Both sides' pieces were set. It was time to reveal the mystery. And Ling snorted coldly and flipped over her piece. You've lost. Her pleasant voice at this moment was like a deadly scythe, about to reap his life and pronounce his death sentence. The man's body went limp and weak when he saw the piece on the table. His face turned deathly pale, and he seemed to have lost all his strength. How could this happen? The rat. Why was it the rat? The surrounding survivors had begun to disperse. The outcome of the game was already determined. However, some people wanted to witness the man's death and chose to stay and watch. No. The man trembled, his hands shaking. He immediately grabbed the unrevealed piece on the table. It's you've lost. I have the lion. But once the button was pressed, the piece couldn't be changed. The man's attempt to forcefully change it was undoubtedly a violation of the game rules, and the consequence of breaking the rules was only one. His arms suddenly froze in midair. His pupils dilated, and the piece he was holding fell to the ground. No one knew what had happened. The man simply slumped back in his chair and died. Click. The restraints on the chair were released. And Ling took a deep look at the man, got up, and left, the surrounding people making way for her. Death Animal Chess Game Over. Winner is the blue side. Then, a message that only she could see appeared before Ling. Games cleared. 1. Accumulated points. 4. Cooldown time. 23 hours, 30 minutes, 49 seconds. As she took the lead and won the game, the surrounding survivors became eager. Spotlights illuminated the hall, and within moments, 3 more people had initiated games. The atmosphere quickly became intense, highlighting the cruelty of the games. But some people weren't afraid because there was no escape. Even if they lost, wouldn't a painless death be a kind of liberation? At this moment, Ling had followed the map's guidance to the food zone. The other games that had started in the hall were technical ones that she wasn't good at, so she didn't need to pay attention to them. The food zone was located on the second floor and was much less crowded than the game zone. It was also a large room, lined with long tables and cabinets filled with a dazzling array of food. There was everything from seafood, sushi, steak, to red wine, like a huge luxurious buffet restaurant. It was no exaggeration to say that this was the most luxurious place all the survivors had seen since arriving, something that even in modern times would only be found in the wealthiest areas. Pleasant music played throughout the second floor, and a red carpet led directly to a wine cellar at the end. Ling wasn't particularly interested in wine. She wasn't here to eat, but simply to familiarize herself with the surroundings. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of a somewhat familiar figure out of the corner of her eye, but the person disappeared around the corner of the staircase. She wasn't sure who it was, so she immediately followed. However, when she reached the third floor, the person was nowhere to be seen. This was the living zone. The corridors branched out in all directions, forming a large, square-shaped structure. Rooms lined both sides of the hallways. Did they go into a room? Ling had no choice but to give up searching and start observing the third floor. Fortunately, these rooms could be registered, which would save her a lot of trouble. The ring on her hand was the key. Once registered, the room would belong exclusively to her for 10 days, and no one else could forcibly open it. Chapter 131. The Surge in Players. Ling casually chose a room near the stairs. After confirming no one was around, she held her ring close to the door. The electronic lock clicked, and the door swung open. She entered the room and quickly closed the door behind her. As she expected, the room was a luxurious suite, fully equipped with everything one could need. Apart from the unsettling games, being here was pure enjoyment. There's even a TV? Ling was surprised. During her time on the Novice Island, the manor rooms hadn't had televisions. But there were obvious marks on the wall, indicating that a TV had once been there, likely removed by the system's influence. She eagerly turned on the television, only to be met with disappointment. Well, I guess that was too much to hope for. The only thing playing was a live broadcast of the games on the first floor, with each game representing a different channel. If no games were in progress, the TV had no broadcasting function. Still, it wasn't bad. At least she could observe the rules and specifics of other games from the comfort of her room. It was still early morning. But since there was no sun in this massive, enclosed space, there was no need to worry about a regular sleep schedule. Ling tested the water temperature in the bathroom and then began filling the bathtub. Since she was here and had such excellent accommodations, she naturally wanted to enjoy herself. She took off her clothes and socks, rested her hands on the edge of the bathtub, closed her eyes, and began to doze off. White foam spread across the water's surface. Her smooth skin, white as snow with a hint of pink, was partially obscured by the rippling water. The 24-hour cooldown period was annoying. Otherwise, Ling would have attempted to complete all 10 games consecutively and leave. After all, she couldn't be sure if her amulet of fortune would always grant her unbelievable luck. Whoosh, whoosh, and Ling, wrapped in a towel, dried her hair. The game on the TV had reached its conclusion, and she cast a curious glance at it. The two players were competing in a game of Golden Flower. With no dealer, the cards were dealt by a machine on the table, eliminating the possibility of cheating and relying entirely on luck. Because there were no chips, the rules were simple. Compare the hands. Once the cards were dealt, there was no room for maneuvering, and the game ended quickly. It was best of 5, and this was the final round. The woman's straight flush beat the man's straight. The man, in a fit of rage, seemed to be making a last-ditch effort before his death, attempting to drag the woman down with him. Unfortunately, the system's judgment was swift. Before he could even grab her, he was dead. It was like a sudden death, without any warning signs. Is this the power of the system? Completely untraceable. Ling sighed. With the end of the game, the TV automatically switched channels. She turned and went to the bed, intending to get a good night's sleep. A double bed, wooden floors, the entire room was spotless and had a fresh scent. It would be a waste not to sleep here. Except for, well, the pink massager and electric cup on the nightstand. Why were these things even here? Ling ignored them, closed her eyes, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. Nothing outside could disturb her slumber. When she woke up again, it was 9 a.m. She was hungry. So she got dressed and prepared to go to the second floor for something to eat. Opening the door, she noticed the hallway was much more crowded than before. Some people walked back and forth with cold, expressionless faces, while others stood at their doorways, observing the passers-by. There were both men and women, all behaving strangely. It was like a street scene with prostitutes, and Ling didn't care. She walked towards the stairs, passing a room where a man was standing outside. "Hey, beautiful, how about a night in my room for an upgrade card?" The man immediately approached Ling. She turned and looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Just the two of us." The man gestured to the room behind him. "And I'll give you an upgrade card. How about it?" He took out a red card and waved it at Ling, proving his possession. "Then what's with all these women?" Ling frowned, ignoring his offer and asking about the others. "They're the same as me, but we men pay and they receive. Here, the rules are absolute. The system doesn't allow us to kill each other, so everyone has absolute safety guaranteed." The man explained with a smile. "After all, everyone needs to release some tension after being cooped up for so long. Don't worry, beautiful. I offer at least half an hour, and you can extend if you're not satisfied." "Not interested." And Ling turned and left without another word. "Hey, beautiful, don't go so fast. If you're a virgin, I'll triple the price." The man wanted to follow, but another woman approached him. He looked regretfully towards the stairs and reluctantly gave up. "I can't believe these people. They're thinking about this when their survival is uncertain." And Ling ignored them and went to the second floor to satisfy her hunger. Why this time? There were more survivors on the second floor. There were at least 200 or 300 people in the hall. Some were choosing their food like in Ling, while others were sitting and chatting with strangers. With absolute safety guaranteed, everyone seemed to have become bolder. Making friends, finding teammates, even short-term relationships. All sorts of people were here, and some of their conversations were quite vulgar. And Ling found an empty spot and sat down, pulling her hood over her head. Her nondescript hoodie and sweatpants helped her avoid unwanted attention. Why did it feel like there were more people? While eating, she kept glancing around. Both the second and third floors felt more crowded. When she went down to the first floor and saw the dozens of spotlights illuminating the hall, she was surprised. Crowds of survivors surrounded each game, far more than there had been in the early morning. Across all 3 floors, there were likely close to 1,000 people. How can there be so many people? Are they all ability users? Holding onto a sliver of hope, Ling went to the first floor to look around. Everyone she knew was an ability user, so perhaps she could find them here. Chapter 132, Hide and Seek. After wandering around, Ling didn't find any familiar faces, but she did discover a commonality between the game zone on the first floor and the living zone on the third. Since the game stakes were the players' lives and personal safety was absolutely guaranteed outside of the games, many had begun adding their own wagers. Upgrade cards, enhancement cards, item cards, even keystone cards. All kinds of cards were being offered. Nearly half the games in the hall hadn't started, their status listed as waiting. These survivors sat in the chairs, loudly announcing their additional bets, hoping to entice others to join their games. But without exception, these were all skill-based games. The players had extreme confidence in their abilities, hoping to use high stakes to lure others into becoming their sacrificial lambs. Even if they lost, it didn't matter. They were going to die anyway, so the cards would be useless. And Ling found this quite novel. She had only slept for a few hours, and the place had already evolved into this. However, she had already participated in a game today, so regardless of what these people did, it had nothing to do with her. She planned to use her remaining 2 exploration opportunities to scout out tomorrow's games, making it easier to choose at the same time. She could also watch other survivors play and learn the rules of the games. Whether skill-based or luck-based, these games all had one thing in common. They were all single-player. There were no absurd team-based games with strangers. This greatly reduced the complexity of the games, at least preventing the appearance of completely incomprehensible ones. And Ling's gaze stopped at the dice game. Its rules were as simple as rock, paper, scissors, completely reliant on luck, and almost no one was interested. If it's still unbelievable luck tomorrow, I might try this one, she mused. She looked away from the table and continued to observe, soon reaching the far end of the hall. There, she found a secluded room, and the seemingly complex setup caught her attention. Tucked away in an inconspicuous location, the room was deserted. If one didn't look carefully, they might not even realize it was a game area. Ling immediately checked the rules. Game name: Death Hide and Seek. Rules: players are divided into Hider and Seeker. The utility room contains hundreds of items. After the game starts, the Hider has 10 minutes to mark and hide a chosen item within the room. The Seeker also has 10 minutes to find the hidden item and bring it out of the room to win the game. Note: the marked item will emit a red glow when taken out of the room. The item itself will also have a visible mark. The Seeker has 3 chances to ask the Hider for confirmation and can bring out a total of 5 items. The Hider cannot lie when questioned, but has 2 chances to remain silent. The dealer is always the Hider. This game was interesting and simple. Like animal chess, the rules were disadvantageous for the dealer. With hundreds of items, finding a marked item within 10 minutes shouldn't be difficult. Even if they couldn't find all of them, they could eliminate most of the possibilities. Ling carefully studied the rules, a slight smile playing on her lips. She had decided. This was the game she would play tomorrow. When she first arrived on this game island and participated in the chair game, the system hadn't announced the rule against killing each other. That rule was announced only after entering the main hall. This meant the system's rules were absolute, and anything not explicitly forbidden was within the permissible range for survivors. Soon, the next day arrived. After washing up and having breakfast, Ling went straight to the secluded room. Beside the utility room's door was a red button. As soon as she pressed it, the spotlight would shine above her, and the game status would change as she arrived. Just like yesterday, the area was deserted. Since it was in a corner of the hall, most of the attention was focused on the central area. Without hesitation, Ling pressed the red button. The spotlight shone down, and the holographic screen above displayed the game rules. Game: Death Hide and Seek, awaiting start. Since Ling arrived early, there weren't many games in progress in the main hall. The sudden spotlight in the corner naturally attracted the attention of the observing survivors. Compared to yesterday, there were significantly fewer people in the hall today. After all, in a one-on-one game, the mortality rate was 50%. Soon, people began to gather, observing the game rules displayed above Ling's head. The moment she pressed the button, a sticker-like item appeared in her hand. This was the mark, and it was bright red, very conspicuous. Simultaneously, the door to the utility room beside her opened, revealing the scene inside. The small room had 2 shelves on either side, cluttered with various trinkets: ping-pong balls, dolls, coins, models, toy cars, and so on. Crucially, these items were all old and mostly gray, black, or white. A bright red mark would be incredibly noticeable on them. The rules seemed quite unfavorable for the Hider, which was why the surrounding survivors were eager to try. Ling had specifically changed her clothes today. A white sailor uniform, a blue pleated skirt, and black translucent stockings showcased her long, slender legs. Unidentifiable letters adorned her stockings, complemented by white ankle socks and black loafers. Her long, flowing white hair framed her beautiful face. At this moment, Ling was undoubtedly the most eye-catching sight in the hall. Of course, her deliberately eye-catching and revealing outfit was only one part of her plan to attract survivors. This beautiful lady is so brave. I hope she wins. I wonder if she's available? An upgrade card would be worth it. What are you thinking, loser? Someone like her would cost at least 3 cards. Don't be delusional. So beautiful. It makes my blood boil. My little soldiers are getting restless. Most people were just here to watch the excitement. They weren't interested in the game itself. Ling ignored their chatter, standing still like a model, waiting for a participant to arrive. Chapter 133. Exploiting the Loophole. Move aside, you bunch of animals who only know how to talk big and think with your lower halves. A bold female voice rang out from behind the crowd. A woman with dyed blonde hair pushed her way through and stood before Ling. Little girl, since you dare to be the dealer, you must be prepared for the consequences. The woman entered the hide-and-seek game area. Despite her teasing tone, her movements were swift. She stepped forward and decisively pressed the red button on the wall. Death hide-and-seek game start. Who here isn't a killer? Ling snorted coldly and turned to enter the utility room. The moment she stepped inside, the Hider's game time officially began. The utility room door closed automatically, and a timer appeared above the doorway. Time ticked by, but Ling wasn't in a hurry. Instead, she carefully observed the surrounding items. The dolls were the best hiding spots. She could unzip them and conceal the mark inside. However, there were few dolls in the room. The seeker could take 5 items and ask about another, making 6 items in total. The probability of finding the marked item among just 6 in the entire utility room was quite high. Moreover, no one was foolish enough to overlook such an obvious hiding spot. As for other items like coins, ping-pong balls, and the like, they were even more conspicuous. Winning would require exploiting a loophole in the system's rules. 10 minutes flew by, and the utility room door opened. The onlookers outside focused their attention on Ling, who stood at the entrance with a smile. "Your turn. Little girl, cherish the last 10 minutes of your life," the woman said provocatively, brushing past Ling and entering the utility room. Simultaneously, the timer above the door reset and started counting down. The door remained open while the seeker searched, allowing the onlookers to see inside the utility room. The shelves inside had 4 levels. Originally, the items were neatly arranged on each level, but Ling had piled everything onto the top shelf. Child's play. This woman was a rare survivor who didn't panic during the game. With a sneer, she glanced provocatively at Ling, who was still standing inside the doorway. Then, with a powerful shove, she shook the shelf. Crash. Instantly, the items tumbled down, scattering across the floor. However, because the room was small, the shelf couldn't be completely toppled, only leaning against the opposite shelf. Although this reduced the woman's movement space, it didn't hinder her from searching the fallen items. But she didn't do that. Instead, she pushed the shelf back upright and then calmly squatted down to rummage through the scattered items. Dolls, toys, toy cars, and anything else that could potentially conceal the mark were piled together. She only discarded items she was absolutely certain weren't marked. Soon, the woman began checking the other shelf. Ling hadn't piled the items there but had scattered them across the deepest part of the shelf. Her intention was simply to waste the woman's time. However, what Ling could do in 10 minutes, the woman could also do. Quickly, the woman finished checking the items on the shelf, leaving only a dozen or so dolls piled on the floor. She glanced at the timer. 4 minutes remained. She immediately began eliminating the dolls, from simplest to most complex, until only 6 items were left. "Little girl, you're going to lose. How can you be so sure before you've even found it?" Ling retorted, not backing down. "First question, does this have the mark?" The woman picked up a small car made of building blocks and asked. The mark could be hidden between any of the blocks, and disassembling it would be too time-consuming. So the woman used her first question. Ling had only 2 options: remain silent or answer truthfully. She chose the former. Seeing this, the woman immediately set aside the toy car as one of the items she would take. She then picked up a few more items. Suddenly, she noticed Ling's loafers. A dividing line marked the entrance to the utility room, and Ling had remained inside the room the entire time. The woman recalled the game rules, a subtle smile appearing on her lips. Second question, does this teddy bear have the mark? Ling remained silent, a reaction the woman had anticipated. Her silence forced the woman to take the teddy bear as well. But then, Ling suddenly laughed, standing up and looking confidently at the woman. The onlookers outside were puzzled. Why wasn't she using her remaining time to confirm the location of the mark? But the woman's next words made the crowd gasp in realization. "You are indeed clever, but unfortunately, I've seen through your trick." The woman's smile widened. She could already taste victory. She continued, wanting to make sure Ling understood why she lost, and also to explain to the onlookers, showcasing her intelligence. "You deliberately wore a skirt today, and your entire outfit is very innocent and pretty. If your opponent were a man, you might have won, but you never expected to encounter a woman. Most people, upon seeing you, would assume you have no pockets to hide anything. But you haven't left the utility room for a single moment. This means you exploited a loophole in the game rules and hid the marked item on your person." Gasp. The survivors outside gasped, suddenly understanding. The woman was right. They hadn't considered that the item could be hidden on Ling's person. But thinking about it carefully, she had indeed remained at the doorway, never leaving the utility room. So that's how it was. My third question, are you hiding the item on your body? The woman looked at Ling confidently. Ling only had one question left that she was obligated to answer truthfully. Even if she didn't hand over the item, what could she do? The woman could simply force her out of the utility room. After all, Any items carried by Ling didn't count towards the Seeker's limit of 5, and regardless of who carried it out, as long as the marked item appeared outside the room, the Seeker Won.An Ling smiled and stepped back, leaving the utility room. Yes, but so what? Chapter 134. Survivors enter the game. What? The woman was stunned, her face a mask of disbelief. The surrounding survivors mirrored her expression, their eyes wide as they stared at Ling, completely bewildered. What's going on? How is this possible? The woman still couldn't accept it. Why would you hide an unmarked item on yourself? But as the timer above her head continued to tick down, everyone realized the game wasn't over yet. I see. You're very clever. A trick within a trick. The woman sighed, looking at the 30 seconds remaining on the timer. She knew she didn't have enough time and could only gamble. She had already chosen the 5 items in her hands and had thoroughly searched everything else, almost certain they weren't marked. In that case, the marked item could only be among the ones she held. Still uneasy, the woman used the remaining time to double-check the discarded dolls. She looked at Ling, whose expressionless face gave nothing away. She knew she had met her match. Unexpectedly, she had to entrust her life to the whims of fate. With a sigh, and only 10 seconds left, the woman stepped out of the utility room with the 5 items. The moment her feet left the boundary line, her eyes glazed over, and she collapsed to the ground. The toys in her hands fell, the building block car scattering into pieces. A holographic message appeared above her head. Seeker violated game rules. Hider wins. A deathly silence fell over the crowd. None of the survivors understood what had happened. Ling took a coin she had hidden from her pocket and tossed it onto the ground. Then, she turned and walked away, leaving the bewildered survivors behind. From the beginning, the woman had been led by Ling. Ling had indeed stood inside the utility room and hidden an item. If the woman had been foolish enough to overlook this, Ling would have found other ways to draw her attention to it. Of course, if the woman hadn't even noticed that, she would have had no hope of winning anyway. Violating the game rules was one of Ling's winning strategies. She had hidden another item inside the teddy bear. Without realizing it, the woman had carried out more than 5 items, thus violating the rules. This was the misdirection caused by Ling's silence in response to the woman's questions. As for where the actual marked item was hidden, it was simple. Any item in the utility room could be marked, and Ling had marked one of the shelves. This certainly qualified as an item within the room. She had marked the top of the shelf, not the bottom, which was obscured by the supporting legs. Marking the bottom carried the risk of discovery. Rules were meant to be broken. Only fools followed them blindly. Games cleared, 2. Accumulated points, 8. Time remaining, 18 hours, 40 minutes, 20 seconds. If this exponential growth continues, the points after the 10th game will be a terrifying number. Ling glanced at the message and closed the holographic display. Having planned her strategy the day before, she participated in the game early, without even activating today's blessing. In her opinion, she could easily handle this hide-and-seek game even without the blessing. Back in her room, she lay on the bed, preparing for a nap, and twirled the pendant around her neck. Amulet of Fortune buff activated. Unbelievable luck is now on your side. You are the epitome of fortune. Remaining time, 18 hours, 30 minutes, 10 seconds. Right, the other blessings don't seem to be of much use here. Soon, evening arrived. Ling left her room, intending to get something to eat on the 2nd floor. The streetwalkers were still in the hallway, their business seemingly brisk. Even through the relatively soundproof doors, she could still hear the passionate gasps from within, suggesting rather enthusiastic encounters. Ling blushed slightly and quickly left the 3rd floor. In a corner on the 2nd floor, she ate dinner alone, her eyes scanning the surroundings. Strange, why does it feel like there are more people, not fewer? Many unfamiliar faces had appeared in the hall, all with smiles and barely contained excitement. It wasn't until someone with a backpack arrived on the 2nd floor that Ling's eyes narrowed in realization. These are all survivors. She stood up and went down to the 1st floor, a look of surprise on her face. Spotlights flickered throughout the hall, illuminating dozens of games in the waiting state. Without exception, these games were all hosted by survivors. Had the system added survivors because it was worried about the dwindling number of players? Or was this part of the plan all along? The system didn't provide a clear explanation, But as Ling mingled with the crowd, she quickly learned the rules from the survivors hosting the games. Competing against these survivors also counted towards the total number of games cleared and had no time limit. This meant that with enough luck, one could potentially clear all the games and leave the island in a single day. Another advantage was that losing against a survivor didn't result in death, but instead transformed the loser into one of them. Conversely, the survivor would take the loser's place as a player. However, there was one aspect Ling disliked. The accumulated points didn't double after winning. This alone made her abandon the idea of competing against the survivors. In her view, becoming a survivor was no different from death, so she might as well take her chances as a player. The presence of survivors didn't affect the games hosted by players. If a player hosted a game, the rewards remained the same, regardless of the opponent. However, the absence of death as a penalty and the allure of becoming a player were huge temptations for both players and survivors. For players, becoming a survivor meant staying alive, with the chance to regain player status by winning against another player. For survivors, becoming a player meant the opportunity to leave the island, a naturally exciting prospect. What were these survivors? Ling believed they were likely players from previous rounds, or those trapped on the island for other reasons, eventually becoming survivors. Their minds were twisted and driven mad, trapped on an island for decades, experiencing death over and over again. Anyone would go insane. Chapter 135, Ability Enhancement. Unfortunately, all the games in the hall were controlled by the system and did not allow the survivors to gamble privately. Otherwise, Ling could have tried to win some extra loot, but even if it were allowed, probably no one would be in the mood to do so. At this moment, the games in the hall were like the Grim Reaper to them, something to be avoided, let alone actively approached. Having understood the situation here, Ling felt bored with these survivors and chose to leave and return to her room. Perhaps their appearance could indirectly increase the survival rate of some survivors. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Ling had basically figured out the games in the hall on the first floor. During this period, besides participating in necessary games, she mostly stayed in her room to rest, also to avoid the chaotic situation outside. More and more survivors began to pour in, keeping the casino at a constant number, which meant that there were fewer and fewer survivors left. Those who could survive until the 5th day undoubtedly had not only extremely strong abilities, but also indispensable luck. During these 3 days, all of Ling's blessings were ultimate luck, which allowed her to smoothly win the few games that completely relied on luck. The first 2 games were Dice and Golden Flower, and she won both with an overwhelming advantage. At this moment, she was walking in the hall on the first floor, preparing to participate in her 5th game. However, almost half of the venues she saw were occupied by survivors acting as the banker. She didn't want to play against them, so she either had to continue looking for games where other survivors were the banker or find a game she felt confident in and wait for the current banker to leave. At this time, she passed by one of the simplest games and looked at the banker. The other person was very clever and had his backpack on. The brand new backpack was enough to prove his identity. Without a doubt, the person sitting in front of Ling was a survivor. The survivors who had been trapped on the island for over a decade had tattered backpacks, while the survivors trapped on this game world island had no worries about food and drink, and almost all of them didn't have backpacks. Ling stopped in front of him. The current game relied entirely on luck, which was perfect for her. No matter what game you participated in, the rewards were the same, so naturally, she would choose some simpler games to play. Life and death are determined by fate. Wealth and honor are in the heavens. Want to try your luck? The man had a gentle smile on his face and took the initiative to invite Ling when he saw her stop in front of him. Perfect. My luck has always been pretty good. Ling also smiled frankly and sat down. Instantly, the chair restrained her, and the game was officially announced to begin. Game name: Death, Rock, Paper, Scissors. Rules: fist is rock, open palm is paper, 2 fingers is scissors, scissors, paper, rock, scissors. At the beginning of each round, both sides put their hands into the pipe on the table and simultaneously select a gesture and press the red button. After that, the gesture cannot be changed, otherwise it will be considered a foul. The bigger one wins, best 2 out of 3 rounds. Rock, paper, scissors was familiar even to 3-year-old children, but to avoid any loopholes in the system, Ling still carefully read the game rules. Let's begin, ladies first, the man said proactively with a faint smile. This game was entirely based on luck. Ling was not polite, and directly put her hand into the pipe in front of her. After the game started, the top of this pipe would open, revealing the two people's gestures inside. This could avoid the problem of not being able to play simultaneously due to different speeds. Seeing Ling put her arm in, the man also quickly put his right hand in. "Madam, I'll tell you the answer beforehand. I will play paper." "In that case, I'll play scissors then. After all, I don't want to lose," and Ling also politely responded. After the two of them had made their gestures in the pipes, they pressed the buttons on the table. Countdown, 3, 2, 1. The top of the pipe opened with a click, and the gestures of the two were revealed. The man indeed played paper, and Ling played scissors. A trace of surprise flashed across the other person's face, but he still maintained a smile. "It seems this lady is quite an honest person." "Thank you. I naturally don't like to lie." As she spoke, Ling closed the pipe again and put her right hand in again. "This time I'll still play paper." The man also quickly put his hand into the pipe and pressed the button before Ling. "Is that so? Then I'll also play paper," Ling said with a smile, looking at the other person. Hearing this, the man instantly tensed up. "Wait a minute. Didn't you say you didn't want to lose the game? Why would you play paper?" "Playing paper is just a draw. I naturally haven't lost," Ling replied calmly. Compared to before, the man's face obviously lost its previous composure and began to panic. He wanted to use psychological tactics to defeat the opponent, not knowing that he had already been seen through. Seeing that Ling was about to press the button, the man's face instantly changed dramatically. "Wait a minute. Please give me another chance. I don't want to die yet." Ling sneered when she heard this. "Then do you think I want to die?" She pressed the button on the table without hesitation. The two people's gestures were revealed. The man had indeed lied. He didn't play paper, but rock, because he had predicted that Ling would still play scissors in the second round. But who knew that the other party didn't play by the rules at all, or rather, had already seen through his tricks at this moment. He seemed to have used all his last strength, and the whole person slumped on the chair with a deathly pale face. "Heh, maybe this is also a kind of..." Before the man finished his words, he completely lost his life. As the restraints on the chair were released, Ling took a deep look at the other person. "You are free." She turned and left, walking upstairs. At this moment, the light screen prompt appeared. Games cleared, 5. Cumulative points, 64. Remaining time, 14 hours, 10 minutes, 20 seconds. Very good. Next time, if I double the points, it will break 100. Ling looked at the points above and felt a little happy. After 10 games, not to mention anything else, her point gains would definitely not be small. Suddenly, she only felt a warm current surging in her body, and then she felt that her whole person became refreshed, leveled up. Sure enough, winning games also gave experience rewards. But now that her ability was sealed, Ling didn't know how much it had improved. Chapter 136, Confrontational Game. You have successfully won 5 games. Winning the upcoming 6th game will unlock your professional ability based on the survival rate. Special reminder, the last 4 games are extremely dangerous. Luck and skills are useless. The only thing you can rely on is strength. The special game zone on the 4th floor has been opened. Please be prepared. On the morning of the 6th day, Ling should have come downstairs to participate in her 6th game, but unexpectedly, as soon as the clock's hands reached 12, the light screen prompt appeared in front of all survivors who had completed the 5th game. It seemed that they had entered the second half, and the difficulty of the games in the second half seemed to be vastly different from the first half. Since the special game zone on the 4th floor had been opened, Ling didn't plan to stay in her room any longer. She took her backpack and decided to go up and check out the situation. In the corridor on the 3rd floor, there were already many survivors or lucky ones who had come out of their rooms. Without exception, they were all heading towards the stairs. Ling blended into the crowd and arrived on the 4th floor, where she saw the newly opened special game zone. Unlike the 3 floors below, the entire 4th floor space was very small, about a quarter of the size of one floor, and in the shape of a square. On the 4 walls were doors seamlessly integrated with the walls. It was unknown what was hidden inside, but Ling guessed that those were probably the so-called game zones. The people around were also bustling around these doors, trying to observe the situation inside or get some kind of prompt, but unfortunately, the light screen did not give everyone a reasonable explanation. Soon, some more people woke up from their sleep and arrived on the 4th floor one after another. Perhaps due to the number of people, The door closest to the stairs creaked open. The inside of the door was wrapped in a layer of transparent energy, making it impossible for people to see the scene inside. At this moment, everyone on the 4th floor received a system prompt to participate in the 6th game. Everyone looked at each other. Everyone understood that they had no choice at the moment, so they all decisively clicked agree. Of course, some survivors planned to choose to participate in the game at the last minute today, and these people naturally clicked refuse. Random grouping will now begin. Group 1. Survivor 8305, Survivor 3302, Lucky 1 1086. Group 2. Group 3. Survivor 520, Survivor 120. Please enter the gate according to your group number. Next is the first group. The people participating in the game were divided and entered the gates one by one according to their group names. After each person passed through the layer of light, their figure disappeared from everyone's eyes. No one knew what was on the other side of the door or where they went. Soon, it was Group 3's turn, and Ling squeezed through the crowd and stepped forward. Just then, a young girl also stood beside her. What a coincidence. She turned her head and glanced at the other person. Yeah, I didn't expect to meet again so soon. I hope I won't die at your hands this time, the girl said with a grin. But inside, she was extremely nervous. She didn't know what the game inside the door was. She only knew that she was so unlucky to meet Ling again and be in the same group as her. Rules. After the game starts, the arena will release a giant black bear that has been hungry for 2.5 days. All players must work together to kill it to achieve victory. Special statement. For each person who dies, the recovered ability will be reduced by 10%. If no one dies and the team wins, everyone can recover 100% of their professional ability. Considering that it is difficult for ordinary people to fight a black bear with their bare hands, everyone is allowed to use the weapons given in the newbie gift pack. Countdown. 180 seconds. Ling was stunned and glanced around. There were a total of 10 people in the arena, which meant that for every person who was injured or killed, the unlocked ability would be reduced by 10%. Considering the uncertainty of subsequent games, it was definitely most reliable to recover 100% of one's ability, because only strength was truly one's own. Damn it, my weapon is a lighter. What's the use? To light the black bear's fur? A man immediately cursed. At this time, everyone also reacted and found that all the weapons in their backpacks were unusable. The only thing they could use was the weapon from the newbie gift pack they received when they first came to this world. This, Li Xinyue speechlessly took out a comb. Should I comb its fur then? The several lucky ones in the team were in no better situation. Having been trapped on the island for so long, their newbie weapons were long gone. In other words, at this moment, they had only their bare hands. Within the 10 people, only one woman's weapon was a steel pipe, which was also the only thing that could be used as a weapon. The key was that it was a blunt instrument, unable to cause effective damage to the black bear. She was also the last girl in the arena besides Ling and Li Xinyue. This is so unlucky. No one is useful, and there are 3 useless burdens in the team. How the hell are we supposed to fight a market? A survivor stood on the spot irritably and cursed. The useless burdens he was talking about were naturally the 3 women in the arena. Well, now let's all die together. Damn it, if you want to die, you go die. I don't want to die. Woman, give me your weapon. Everyone spread out. I don't believe 10 people fighting for their lives can't kill a black bear. A crazy look appeared in a lucky one's eyes. He had finally become a survivor and had hope of escaping this island, so he would never give up even if he had to fight to the death. Everyone was startled by his ferocious gaze and wisely scattered, avoiding being too close and unable to maneuver. Of course, they didn't want to die either. Since someone was taking the lead, compared to being bitten to death alive, what's the harm in fighting for their lives? Ling dug her ears with her fingers and walked to one side indifferently. Li Xinyue, who was beside her, was holding a comb and panicking. Hey, swordsman, think of something quickly, she said anxiously. Seeing the countdown above her head getting closer and closer, her heartbeat also beat faster and faster. Right, I saved your life today, so consider it as returning the favor from back then. Ling suddenly thought of something and smiled at her. Ah? Li Xinyue was puzzled and wanted to ask for the reason, but at this moment, the countdown above everyone's heads reached 0. Roar. Chapter 137. Defection and Attack. Roar. A huge roar came from the center of the arena. tearing at everyone's eardrums and making their hearts skip a beat. It's coming. The large circular mechanism in the center of the arena suddenly opened, and a platform slowly rose, with a huge black figure gradually appearing in everyone's sight. Before the platform was level with the arena floor, the black bear roared and leaped up. Its massive body crashed down, making the entire ground seem to shake. Roar! The black bear stood up, opened its giant mouth, and let out another howl. Sharp yellow teeth stained with mucus dripping onto the ground. It was over 2 meters tall and could weigh up to 300 kilograms. Just standing there, it was like a thick, indestructible city wall. What a joke. Is this something a human can kill? A survivor stumbled back in panic, seemingly scared out of his wits. Most people came from modern society, not some wilderness. Where had they seen such a giant creature? At most, it would be in a zoo, but in a zoo, it was separated by thick concrete and high walls, so there was no way to compare. Only now, facing this black bear directly, did everyone understand how terrifying it was. As long as they were still human, they would feel fear and would shrink back. If one person escaped, the entire team would fall apart, and they would become a meal for this black bear. Damn it, let's go together. The lucky one holding the steel pipe shouted, trying to boost the morale of the people around him. Damn it, we have to hold it back even if it kills us. But the people around him didn't move at all. What everyone was thinking now was not how to kill the black bear, but how to leave this hellish place. If they had weapons, that would be great. If they had abilities, it would be even better. Even 10 more black bears might not be a match for a single person in the arena. But unfortunately, the system didn't want to let everyone win this game so easily. You bunch of... Bang! A gunshot echoed throughout the arena. A finger-sized blood hole appeared on the black bear's head. Red and white liquid spurted out, and its huge body crashed to the ground. The lucky one who was about to curse was instantly interrupted. He looked stunned and then looked to his side. The one who fired the shot was actually the white-haired girl. Everyone in the arena was stunned. They couldn't believe what was happening before their eyes. Happiness came too suddenly. Had they been saved just like that? But more people looked at Ling with a hint of fear and awe. A handgun. This wasn't just a thermal weapon. It was clearly a great equalizer. Li Xinyue was also extremely shocked. She knew that Ling was very strong, and she even completely trusted what she had just said about being able to deal with the black bear. But she never expected it to be so clean and decisive. A victory with no casualties and 100% ability unlock. You actually have a gun. She looked at the Glock 18 in Ling's hand. No matter how she looked at it, it looked like a toy gun. Is there a problem? This is my newbie weapon. Ling raised her gun, blew away the smoke from the muzzle, and then put the gun into her pocket under everyone's shocked and fearful gazes. Li Xinyue fell silent. Now thinking back to their previous encounter, she felt a lingering fear. Ling could have completely killed her with the gun, but she still chose to fight with her ability. Even though she still didn't win, ability awakening game over. All players survived, restoring 100% of professional abilities. At this moment, the light screen prompt popped up. Everyone felt the heavy shackles that had bound their bodies released, and they were instantly filled with power again. The lucky one just now threw away the steel pipe in his hand, and then pressed the switch on his bracelet. A piece of information only visible to him popped up, explaining the current rules of the island. No acts of killing each other are allowed in public areas, and all weapons are prohibited. The arena in front of them belonged to a game area and was not within the marked public areas. Moreover, now that the game was over, there were no restrictions on the people. After the lucky one confirmed the information, he turned back and glanced at the open arena gate, a cold smile appearing on his lips. The next second, his figure turned into a black shadow and suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Watch out! Li Xinyue suddenly shouted at Ling. Her body wanted to turn into water, but it was too late because the other party's speed was too fast. Ling's shadow began to wriggle, then transformed into a human figure. The person was holding a black dagger tightly in their hand, stabbing directly at her heart. Clang! A bronze sword shining with golden light suddenly appeared and instantly deflected the black dagger, creating a spark. The attacker, who had failed to ambush, turned into a black shadow, dodged the sword's second attack, and his figure flickered to a distance. She has a gun. There are no rules here. What are you waiting for? The lucky one shouted, inciting the other professionals around him. From the brief exchange just now, he knew that the opponent was not easy to deal with. Coupled with the fact that she had a gun, his situation would be very passive. But since they had already started, there was no turning back. Several of them stopped in their tracks after hearing what the lucky one said. Yes, if all the subsequent games were like this one, this gun would indeed be a great killing weapon. But there were also a few people who didn't want to cause more trouble and hurriedly left the scene. In the end, only 3 people stood in front of the lucky one. The 4 of them were working together, intending to kill and rob here. You overestimate yourselves? And Ling sneered. Her backpack moved on its own despite there being no wind, and 2 swords instantly flew out and hovered in midair. Li Xinyue was stunned for a moment. She didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but the other party's actions touched a scar deep in her heart, making her somewhat angry. You maggots deserve to die. She actively stood beside Ling, activated her ability, and the surrounding air gradually became moist as water arrows appeared in the air. This was not the sea, so ultimately her ability would be much weaker. Of course, this was only reflected in her least proficient area, offensive power. Self-preservation was still completely sufficient. Ling turned her head and glanced at her in surprise. This is my business. You don't need to take risks. This young lady likes to stand up for justice. What's wrong with that? Li Xinyue snorted coldly and immediately waved her arm, the surrounding rain of arrows also shooting out. The 4 people opposite immediately scattered, attacking the 2 from 3 different directions, and the lucky one once again turned into a shadow and disappeared from where he stood. Since you like to stick your neck out so much, we don't mind adding 1 more person to be buried with her. Chapter 138. A strange phenomenon. The 4 of them worked together, determined to kill their opponents. The man was confident that his ability to move through shadows could help him avoid the handgun's damage. As for the other 3, they were just his scapegoats, used to draw fire. 3 people attacked Ling, each using their own abilities. One transformed into a giant werewolf monster, another's arm stretched out like a rubber band, and the last one moved at an extreme speed, instantly arriving in front of her and kicking. Ling also blocked the incoming kick with her foot, turned around, stretched out her right hand, grabbed a sword hovering in the air, and smoothly cut off the other person's arm. At the same time, the 2 flying swords behind her flew directly towards the werewolf in the distance. Click! The sound of a bullet being loaded came. She raised her left hand, pointing the gun directly at the man in front of her. He froze instantly. Whoosh! The sword pierced through his chest. Before he could even react, he was killed. The other 2 flying swords also pierced through the werewolf. Now, her only opponent was the one-armed rubber man. The lucky one from before was very shrewd. He didn't choose to attack Ling directly, but instead attacked Li Xinyue. But obviously, an ability focused on assassination met an ability with extremely strong survivability. The pitch-black dagger instantly pierced through the girl's body, but the upturned corners of his mouth suddenly froze, because the expected scene of blood splattering did not occur. He looked down and was instantly stunned. The other party's body had turned into floating water, completely dodging his attack. Failing with 1 strike, he decisively wanted to escape into the shadows again. What? The girl in front of him completely turned into water and became transparent. The shadows on the ground also disappeared at this moment. He couldn't use his ability. The man was horrified, a strong sense of foreboding rising in his heart. Sure enough, the next second, the girl transformed into a stream of water that surged over and completely enveloped him. At this moment, he could no longer move. A head wrapped in a mass of water formed a sphere. His face was filled with fear, and bubbles rose in the water sphere. His lungs began to fill with water, but this only caused uncontrollable violent coughing, and the liquid entering his body only increased. Soon, his lungs were filled with water. The man's face turned purple, and finally he died of suffocation. The water flow instantly lost its gravity and scattered on the ground, then slowly converged into the figure of the girl. Ling had been waiting by her side for a long time. Li Xinyue turned her head and saw 3 corpses lying not far away, having been dealt with by her long ago. That's it? It's over? Thanks for the help. Ling thanked her and turned to leave towards the game exit. Hey you! Li Xinyue stomped her foot and hurried to catch up. 4th floor, special game zone. The few people who had chosen to leave earlier were already hidden in the crowd. Seeing these two women come out, they felt both shocked and relieved. Fortunately, they hadn't been blinded by greed just now. I'm so envious of you, having such a powerful offensive ability. Li Xinyue sat on the side, resting her head on her hand, and looked at Ling beside her. Ling was sitting at the table eating food by herself. She rolled her eyes at the other party. After leaving the 4th floor, she went straight to the food area on the 2nd floor to eat. Why are you following me? Making friends, it's essential when we're out and about, she said with a sansha. The favor has been returned, and in the following games, there's a lot of uncertainty. You and I might become enemies. Ling said indifferently. Hey, it's just that I occupied your resource island once. No need to hold a grudge like this, right? I didn't get anything, and you almost killed me. I even saved your teammate. Li Xinyue gritted her teeth, looking at the unmoved Ling. I just saved you too. Ling didn't even look up. Damn it. This young lady lowered herself to take the initiative to talk to you, and you don't know how to cherish it. Don't wait until you lose it to regret it. Oh, you. I said so much, and you just owe me? Wow, you're so amazing. Ling finally looked up at the other party and said this in an extremely flat and perfunctory tone. I'm a doctor. Li Xinyue was about to go crazy with anger. I'm done eating. Ling stood up, ignoring her, and prepared to leave. Li Xinyue quickly got up and followed. Hey, where are we going now? Back to my room to sleep. And I'm not Hey, nor am I some swordsman. My name is Ling. Ah, sorry. I just remembered that I never actually said my name. My name is Li Xinyue, from Jinling. She scratched her head, somewhat embarrassed. Don't worry, I have a feeling. Didn't the system say it? The next games are all confrontational. We probably won't become enemies. There are so many people after all. That's not certain. Ling replied, arriving at her room on the 3rd floor and stopping. All right, I'm here. If there's anything else, let's talk after we leave this island alive. Okay. Li Xinyue nodded, understanding what Ling meant. She smiled and waved goodbye. It seems she's not a cold and heartless person after all. She was worried about these things. Games cleared. 6. Cumulative points. 128. Remaining time. 15 hours, 18 minutes, 23 seconds. In her room, Ling looked at her points panel. For more games and I can leave. The rules of this game island were fixed, so it seemed there were no hidden missions or anything. She remembered something else and turned on the TV to search for programs, only to find that there were still only live broadcasts of the games on the 1st floor. Starting from the 6th game, that is, after entering the 4th floor, all games had been hidden. It seems no one will know what games will be played next. Ling flipped through the TV channels. At this moment, the number of people playing games in the 1st floor hall had already decreased significantly. Strange, it's already the 6th day. Logically, there shouldn't be anyone still playing the 5th game. So why are there so many people on the 1st floor? She quickly switched between the TV screens and soon discovered something strange. These people's backpacks were worn out, some didn't even have backpacks, and a door on the surrounding walls would occasionally open, letting in new lucky ones. In addition, some survivors who had failed in their gambles had now become part of them, frantically engaging in games. Ling saw the rules through the live broadcast. These transformed survivors had to win 2 games to regain their previous identities. Lose 1, win 2. If they lost another game, the number of times they needed to win would increase, and there were no survivors left on the 1st floor. There were many survivors who had been transformed into lucky ones, and they could only frantically gamble with these people. Conversely, these newly arrived lucky ones only needed to win 3 consecutive games to reach the 4th floor. They would not regain their survivor status by clearing the game island. As for why these lucky ones wanted to go to the 4th floor, no one knew the reason. Chapter 139. The soul condition for victory time quickly arrived at the next day. After washing up and packing her belongings, Ling prepared to head to the 4th floor to participate in the game. Turning the pendant around her neck, this time the blessing was no longer ultimate luck. Obtained blessing pendant enhancement, indomitable spirit. The body can be destroyed, but the will shall endure forever. Increases all physical attributes. Remaining time, 18 hours, 23 minutes, 21 seconds. It seems the next game has nothing to do with luck. Ling murmured, pushed open the door, and walked out. Arriving on the 4th floor, there were still many people gathered there. Li Xinyue seemed to have been guarding the entrance early, waiting for her arrival. How about we join forces and conquer the world together? She greeted Ling enthusiastically. Her idea was simple. The two of them would team up and participate in a game together, which would greatly increase the probability of winning. It's best not to do that. My suggestion is to choose to participate in the game at different times, which will eliminate the possibility of being assigned to the same group. Ling had a premonition that the next game wouldn't be so simple. But since it's a confrontational game, there will be teammates, right? Li Xinyue was puzzled. It was fine to be confident in one's strength, but these words seemed a bit arrogant, right? Could it be that she thought I was too weak? How can you be sure that you and I will definitely be in the same group? What if the system specifies factions, and you happen to be assigned to the opposite side? Ling said in a deep voice. Of course, she accepted the other party's goodwill, but all this should wait until they leave this island. Li Xinyue was momentarily speechless. Okay, I admit I was thinking too simply. You're amazing, I'll listen to you. Then I'll go participate in the game first. You go a little later. We can exchange information afterward. Ling said and actively walked towards the inside of the hall. Li Xinyue nodded and also withdrew from the fourth floor, arriving at the staircase to observe the scene inside. Soon, the number of people was enough. Just like in the sixth game, the system began grouping. As all the numbers were announced, above each door on the fourth floor, except for the first one, the numbers of survivors and lucky ones appeared. This time, it wasn't everyone entering the same door to participate in the same game, but rather everyone being dispersed to participate simultaneously. If I'm not mistaken, each door represents a completely different game. Ling murmured, arriving in front of the seventh door. When she saw the numbers displayed above, a playful smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Group 6 personnel numbers, Lucky 1 1314, Lucky 1 520, Lucky 1 10086, Lucky 1 369. Survivor 6666. 10 people were participating in this game, but the 9 people besides Ling were all lucky ones. She looked at her teammates. At least for now, they should be teammates. Almost all of them had backpacks, and they were brand new. Nearly half of them were originally survivors who had been transformed. As the door in front of them opened, revealing the mysterious light curtain inside, Ling didn't hesitate at all and walked in first. The other 9 people looked at each other, seeing a glimmer of hope born from despair in each other's eyes, but more of it had transformed into excitement and madness. They followed closely behind, and soon there were only a few people left in the fourth-floor hall. These were the people who hadn't been assigned. Li Xinyue also walked in. All the doors around had closed, leaving only the 10 numbers on the doors flashing with green light. On the other side, inside the game arena, Ling observed her surroundings and found herself in a place that resembled a running track. The surroundings were extremely dark, and the ceiling was pitch black, making it feel like being on a huge indoor stage. On both sides were high walls that connected to the dark ceiling, limiting everyone's movement to within the track. The road ahead was divided into numerous squares. The track was only about 10 meters wide, and the length should be close to 1,000 meters. At the end was a giant skull. Its eyes emitted a blue light that shone directly on the track, like a spotlight, staring Hiron at the people at the starting point. Looking at the whole scene, Ling had a vague guess about the content of this game. Game name: Deadly Red Light, Green Light. Rules: when the skull turns around, participants can only stay still. Objects driven by abilities will be considered part of the participant. When the skull turns away, participants can move forward. The first to reach the finish line wins. Note: the frequency of the skull turning is completely random, but the shortest interval will not be less than 3 seconds. Except for internal bodily functions like pulse, heartbeat, and breathing, all external conscious actions will be considered violations. Countdown: 10, 9, 8. Looking at the game rules, Ling fell into thought. What did the first to reach the finish line mean? Obviously, this game meant that only one person could win. She glanced at her surroundings. Sure enough, these lucky ones were intentionally or unintentionally getting closer to her. As for why she was the target, it certainly wasn't because she was a woman, but for her survivor status. As the countdown ended, the giant skull at the end of the track slowly turned its back, and the whole arena fell into darkness. The barrier at the starting point disappeared. Ling didn't rush out immediately, but instead quickly retreated behind the group of lucky ones, to the position of the door where they had entered. These people looked surprised and turned back to look at Ling strangely, but they didn't have time to think about it too much. The result of winning the game was the same. 9 people instantly rushed out, using all their strength to burst out with the fastest speed they had ever achieved. Crack. The giant skull looked bulky, but in reality, it turned its head extremely fast. The lucky one at the very front had a speed-type ability. At this moment, his body was still moving due to inertia and he couldn't stop at all. By the time he reacted, it was too late. 2 blue beams of light had already focused on him. He let out a blood-curdling scream that pierced everyone's eardrums. His body began to emit blue steam, and in the next second, his entire being melted, turning into a pool of blood, instantly leaving no bones behind. Sob, can my family please gift me some October gifts? I'm starving. Chapter 140, Aerial Advantage. Everyone's faces showed shock. Their hearts pounded, their breathing suddenly became rapid, but at this moment, no one dared to make even the slightest extra movement. Only Ling, at the starting point, watched everything with cold eyes. She had already understood the situation of this game, and it was time to act. After all, only one person present could walk out alive. Creak. The giant skull turned quickly, once again facing away from everyone. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief at this moment and immediately started moving. A tense atmosphere enveloped the arena. They dared not be careless. No matter how urgent they felt, they had to be steady and sure. At this moment, a lucky one on the far right stepped on the square in front of him. A flash of light later, he appeared back at the starting point. Damn it! He looked left and right, cursed angrily, and immediately wanted to start again. Just then, the giant skull began to turn, and he immediately stopped. This time, everyone was prepared, and no one moved, and no casualties. When the skull turned back, everyone started moving again. The lucky one currently in the lead also unfortunately triggered a trap. With a flash of light, his figure advanced 50 meters, which made him extremely excited, instantly widening the gap with the second place. However, the lucky one behind him revealed a sinister look at this moment and immediately took out a bow and arrow from his backpack, aiming at the person in front. Whoosh! Without hesitation, he released the bowstring. After all, everyone was an ability user, with physical qualities far exceeding ordinary people. The whistling sound of the arrow in the silent arena was noticed by the lucky one in the lead. Almost instinctively, he lunged to the side, successfully dodging the incoming arrow, but his body also fell heavily to the side due to inertia. Coincidentally, there was a trap right there. The ground was torn apart like a piece of paper, revealing a giant catapult inside. Before the man could react, the mechanism had already been activated. His body was instantly catapulted into the air, drawing an arc. At this moment, the giant skull turned its head again, and its blue light scanned the arena, instantly locking onto him. Despair filled the man's eyes. Before he could even scream, he completely turned into a pool of blood and splattered down. Everyone else remained unmoved, standing still and not daring to move. The more people died, the better it was for them. At the same time, the actions of the second-place survivor gave everyone a hint. That was, they didn't need to follow the rules to complete the game. Since the system had restored their abilities, there must be another purpose. When the blue light disappeared, no one was in a hurry to move forward. Instead, they all began to watch their surroundings vigilantly. Especially the lucky ones in the middle positions, they decisively ran towards the edges, and the second, now first-place survivor also immediately looked back, wary of everyone. For a time, the scene reached a stalemate, and no one dared to act rashly for fear of being ambushed. Everyone came to their senses. Yes, wouldn't they win the game by killing everyone else? Why bother competing with these people? In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. The 7 people on the field were all poised to strike, some taking out weapons, some preparing to use their abilities. Without exception, ranged attacks were the optimal solution at this moment. Close combat might result in mutual destruction. Whoosh! A figure flew over everyone's heads. The person in the lead was the first to notice, and he secretly looked up, instantly revealing a surprised expression. It's that survivor. Hearing this, everyone looked up and saw Ling stepping on a flying sword, passing over their heads at an extremely fast speed, instantly taking the lead. The rules only stated that reaching the finish line would result in victory. They didn't specify that flying wasn't allowed. Damn it, shoot her down. The lucky ones finally remembered the only survivor on the field, who they had ignored at the beginning of the game. Countless attacks instantly poured out. Fireballs, arrows, unknown liquids, and so on. And Ling put her 2 fingers together and waved her arm. Her forward speed remained undiminished, but the other 2 swords had already flown out, instantly cutting off all the incoming attacks. And no matter how powerful these lucky ones were, she could fly, and this was her greatest advantage. On the other side, the 4th floor, special game zoned Lishinue, who was waiting there, finally understood the meaning of the survivor numbers displayed on the doors. They were recording the status of the game inside. Every time someone died, their corresponding number would turn gray, then slowly fade and finally disappear completely. She glanced at the surrounding doors and found that the game room Ling was in was one of the rooms with the most casualties. Lishinue couldn't help but feel worried. There was only Ling, one survivor, in that room. These lucky ones would definitely attack her together. However, at this moment, inside the room, the lucky ones, seeing that their attacks were useless, decided to risk their lives and defy the game rules. The rules for lucky ones were slightly different from those for survivors. Even if they won the game, they wouldn't have the chance to leave the island. Their only chance was to become survivors again. And to get this chance was also very simple. If they didn't get it through gambling on the 1st floor, then after arriving on the 4th floor, their mission became to kill a survivor in the game. As long as they killed a survivor, they could also get rid of their lucky one status. They had wasted the simplest opportunity on the 1st floor. Now that they had arrived on the 4th floor, they absolutely couldn't let go of even the slightest chance. No one wanted to stay in this hellish place forever, experiencing games and death again and again. The lucky one at the very front gritted his teeth and immediately activated his ability. His muscles bulged, and his whole body began to grow hair rapidly. He quickly turned into an unknown quadrupedal monster. He gathered his strength, leaped up, and then used the walls at the edge to propel himself. Boom! His entire being, like a cannonball, crashed straight into Ling in the sky. This is the first time I've seen someone so eager to die. She snorted coldly, waved her fingers, and the 2 flying swords were instantly summoned, drawing a graceful arc in the air, one above and one below. Just as he approached Ling, the 2 swords pierced through him from above and below. Swish! The swords sliced through flesh, the 2 swords intersecting like a sharp sickle, instantly dismembering him. Blood splattered out, but Ling easily blocked it with her ability. She remained suspended high in the air, spotless, having easily dealt with the opponent attacking her.